Pardon me while I have a strange interlude. There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art. Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I'm your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and today's show is brought to you by 23 Weasels in a Trench Coat, posing as a man. So if you see 23 Weasels in a trench coat pretending to be a man, I'm sure you'll be fooled because it will look like a man on the outside. You have to have a very special type of perception to realize that it's actually just 23 weasels. But he is the one that is responsible, or they are the one that is responsible for the show today. Because my guest, I have been assured, is not actually 23 weasels inside of a trench coat. But I have suspected as much over the years. He's been on the show before. He's a good friend of mine, and he actually was on to talk about Halloween 3. If you go back in the list of our third movies, the most Reverend StarDoG himself, Steve Mills. How's it going, Steve?
Good evening, Mr. Strange. How are you?
doing well. Well, and the reason I have you on tonight is because we have wibbled and dribbled over the years quite a bit of weird shit, and in formal terms too, in the means of recording past shows that I've been on when I was co-hosting the Eternal Void, but with Jazz, we had you on about some of your crazy paranormal experiences, and we've talked a lot, but we've never really dug into like the music and the festival scene that you were a part of, which I think my listeners will really enjoy hearing about because there's some wild, crazy shit that happened back then. So that's kind of what we're getting into tonight for the listeners. Is we're talking about the free festivals in the UK, and some of the music that Steve did and some of the trouble that he got into back then.
That is well of Wimborne. in a field with several nuns. How dare
yeah. Hanging out with several small species of furry animals, grooving with a pig.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so.
All right. So I'm not actually even sure where to start because we were already talking about this before we started recording. But and I had to keep reeling it in and say, well, we should record this actually. But how about just a little bit of background on the free festivals that were going on in throughout England when you were just a youngin' that you eventually became involved with?
The history probably starts in 1972 with a guy called Wally Hope and a guy called Penny Rambo, whose real names were Phil Russell and I think it's John Batters. And they were part of a group called the Dwarves, who were inspired by an anarchist group from Holland called the Caboteur, which translates to gnomes. So they became the Dwarves.
Okay.
They were set up in West London. And if you look into the sort of the milieu of bands around that period, you're looking at people like the Global Village Trucking Company, you're looking at Hawkwind, you're looking at Pink Fairies, who are all part of this sort of, they were part of what was effectively a loose collective, who all sort of lived in the same sort of squats. Funnily enough, I mean, it's where you also get the Slits and the Clash come from the same sort of background, from the same squats, in effect, later. But this is the early 1970s. You've got underground magazines called the International Times, otherwise known as IT. You've got Oz, there was a famous lawsuit against Oz for obscenity because that had something to do. I can't remember what the picture was. I think it's a Rupert Bearer sort of kids character, and Zigzag and all these magazines who were sort of touting what was sort of a form of anarcho-syndicalism. That was really what everybody was talking about. Everybody tends to think it's left wing, but it sort of isn't even that. It's more, it's a kind of left wing libertarianism, really. But there were virtually every weekend from about 1968 onwards, during the summer period, from about May till the end of September, there was pretty much a festival somewhere in England on somebody's land every weekend. And if you look at the itinerary of bands like Pink Floyd, even Led Zeppelin, I mean, played the Bath Festival, the famous Bath Festival, which, I mean, if you look at the lineup for Bath Festival, it's like, wow. You know, it's a good job we're time travelers and we can go back and watch it.
Yeah.
But so there was already a tradition of festivals, and also there was a sort of enlightened NIMBYism that went along with this, because there were a lot of traditional festivals called fairs. So Strawberry Fair, or the Pink Moon Fair, or the Green Fair in rural parts of Britain. So in Cambridge, mostly in Cambridge, Norfolk, and some parts of the West Country as well. But you did have these fairs which had sort of died out, but were regenerated by a bunch of hippies turning up and going, oh, well, you know, we'll just camp here for a couple of days.
Right.
And there'll be a couple of bands on, there'll be art stuff. But I think the locals liked it to keep it going, because a lot of the places where these festivals took place, there was a good chance that they're going to get built on if they didn't retain the festival. So the meadow was liable for a housing estate if they couldn't say, oh, well, this festival's been going on for 200 years. We need to preserve it. So I say enlightened NIMBYism, if you like. So there was a lot of organised festivals already. And I think people had got to a point where people were almost living on the road anyway from the May to the end of September, and then they'd winter somewhere with a job. They'd have a job over there. Because this is the days when you could literally just walk out of one job and get another one. There was no problem. The unemployment didn't even really exist in the UK in those days. I mean, it sounds incredible now, but it's the way it was. So by 1972, Penny and Wally decided to start this free festival scene. I mean, it was really their idea. And the very first one that you can probably look back as the first in the pantheon of the free festivals was held, of all places, on Windsor Great Park, which is basically the Queen's back garden.
Right.
Windsor Castle back garden. I mean, seriously, I mean, I never went. I was too young. I was only 14 at the time. But if you look at the photographs of it, it's literally, there's this immense sort of like grass walkway that goes on for about 3 or 4 miles that leads up to Windsor Castle. And there's a path at the middle of it, and there's woods on either side of it. Did you watch the Story Crow about Windsor, the legend of the Windsor Huntsman?
No.
I sent you a link. Oh, right, okay. It's worth watching. Story Crow, he does the thing about the Windsor Huntsman, the legend. So they have this free festival in the Windsor Park, and it's well attended. I think, yeah, not massive, but there's a couple of thousand people there. I think it lasted maybe a week. This happens again in 73. At this point, Wally and this anybody who's involved with the rave scene probably doesn't even realise this, that Ibiza's been a centre for sort of hate culture going back to the 1960s. Wally Hope goes to Ibiza for the summer or the winter, I think. And whilst he's there, he gets this sort of like idea to create a festival at Stonehenge. He believes that the stones belong to the people, that they've been stolen by the state on behalf of the state to make money for the state, and that the people need to take them back. I mean, if you look at Europe, you'll find that they used all sorts of names, sort of thing, you know, God, Brahma, you name it, sort of thing, for Stonehenge. Right. So he decides to start a free festival at Stonehenge. Now, so 1974. there's a small but successful festival held at Stonehenge in the June for the solstice. And a group of people stay behind and effectively squat on a piece of land
Right.
just outside, not far from the stones near Amesbury. In September, there's the third Windsor Festival, and it kicks off big time. The police, there's a riot, effectively. People are hurt. It's not nice. I mean, from what I've been told, literally they did that thing where about 6 o'clock in the morning, they just came charging through the tents, just smacking anything and everything that moved. Get out of the, it's gone. Sorry. So a lot of those people then fled to Stonehenge, where you have this small group still. And this is where we get to the famous Wallys of Wessex court case. Because I believe they were, like I say, I thought this was an urban legend, but it turns out to be true. I believe they were on MOD land, which is the easiest one to squat on, because basically the MOD doesn't really give a damn most of the time, as long as you're not harming anything. But there was a bit of a political pushback against, I think people realised what was happening. And there was a bit of...
So wait, this is just for American listeners. The NOD. What type of land is this?
Yeah, this is Ministry of Defence. So it's land that so it belongs. It's either used by the army or various arms of the military. But but Wiltshire, a lot of Wiltshire is MOD land. It's where the tank testing, what have you, happens. But mostly they're not interested. As long as you're not anywhere near anything secret, they don't give a damn. Right. But there seemed to be a bit of a political pushback. So there was a court case involving all these people, the original group of people here, who then, as we know, all changed their name to various forms of Wally.
Right.
So you had Wally Hope. What was the one? Sir Walter Raleigh. Sir Wally Raleigh.
Yeah, Sir Walter Wally, I think it was.
Yeah. So they all turn up in court, and something rather strange occurs. The judge, rather than, as you'd expect, sort of being rather officious about it all and kind of thinking they're a bunch of scummy hippies who need to be removed, calls them to the bench, pulls out a map and says, if you just move 4 yards over here, you're on a different person's land and they can't touch you. At which point the attorneys for the MOD all got rather distraught, as you might imagine, because effectively they hadn't got rid of them at all. And I always thought that was an urban legend, but it turns out it's actually true.
Wow. Yeah.
So that they then moved, if I remember rightly, I'm digging back now, I believe they then moved into a squat in Amesbury for the winter. But there was pretty much a permanent presence somewhere around the Stonehenge area. And there was a small festival in 75. Now, with the advent of punk, I think the whole hippie thing sort of disappeared. In the eyes of the establishment and the eyes of the public, the whole hippie thing sort of just went. But the truth was that the festival was getting bigger year by year. And funnily enough, the punk thing actually sort of just fed into it. I mean, by 82, 83, I remember seeing The Clash were there, Marilyn and Boy George were at Stonehenge. People like that were some really very famous people turning up at Stonehenge. But by 79, the festival was quite a big. That's the first time I went. I went for a couple of days in 1979 because it only lasted, I think it was 4 or 5 days at that time. So by 1979, it was getting quite large. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. But my own life changed. I moved into working with a band that was touring a lot, so I didn't have a lot of free time. And also then I also got a job. So for a couple of years, I was I didn't have, I'd go away for the weekend. I might go to the odd festival for the weekend, but I didn't really get a chance to. But in that period, people had shifted to living on the road. There were a lot of people moved onto the road. So you're probably talking about, wow. I would guess if you put everybody together by about 1980, you probably had about 3,000 buses, trucks, converted and other conversions of people living in them on the road. And
Right.
often
Like
they
I've
would go,
seen some of the pictures you've sent me. It's just crazy. It's just a long convoy of like refurbished double decker buses and big vans and
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, Pantechnicons.
right.
so, so all of a sudden, it becomes quite visible. It's very hard to hide. You know, when
Right.
you're talking about maybe 2,000 people with tents in a field for a few days, yeah, no, you don't really notice it. But then when suddenly you've got 500-600 trucks and buses pulled up all over the place, it's like,
Right.
this is interesting. This is getting towards being an urban
Right.
settlement in a weird sort of way. And of
Yeah.
course, with that came a lot of the infrastructure that you get with urban living. You got cafes, you got people who looked after loos and stuff like that, you know, provided loos. There was a crash tent. And I mean, this is like 1980. You had people who just totally volunteered out of nowhere. They'd have a crash tent, and if you had a bad trip or something, you could go in there and people would talk to you. That people would just basically, you got therapy on the spot. I've seen people talk
Wow.
down. You know, I've had friends who've been there. You know, just said it's brilliant. You know, somebody really fucking, cat. Somebody somebody really gave me a good talking to and pulled me out and pulled my basically my head out of my backside over where I was
Right.
at that particular point because of, you know, whatever they've been up to. Right. So you've got this sort of structure. There was almost a structure to it. And quietly, it's suddenly you got this sort of exponential growth whereby 1980, I think it was 4,000. I think 81 was about 5,000 or 6,000. 82 was like 10,000. And then
Yeah.
1983, you're talking 40, 50,000 people turning up at Stonehenge.
Yeah,
For the
that's wild.
solstice, for the solstice for 2 or 3 days. So my cat's now playing with stuff.
Yeah.
I think, look at me, I'm playing with it. So you've got 40, 50,000 people who are turning up for 3 or 4 days at Stonehenge. At which point, the government, everybody starts taking notice. This is Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher was came from the trades class, same as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And the trade, it's an interesting dynamic because many upper class people had to marry into trades class people to keep the places they lived. Because after post World War II, something like, I mean, the house I live in, the house I grew up in, used to be a hall. It was knocked down.
Right.
One wall of my garden was what's left of the hall. It was Attleborough Hall. You can look it up online. If you Google it, you can look at my house. That's what my house used to. That's the land my house was built on. But literally hundreds of these places closed down. And a lot of the people who did survive, the only way they managed to survive was by marrying into what's called trade, which is like, say, somebody who owns a massive sort of superstore, you know, chain of supermarkets or something. But they're not aristocracy in the real sense. They might have a title, but they're not old money. So there was always this sort of snobbery that went with it. But Thatcher wanted to change the UK fundamentally. And one of the things, well, you bloody stop that. Sorry. So Thatcher wanted to change the UK fundamentally. And one of the things that she saw was this sort of debauched dilettante, upper middle class and upper an aristocracy who indulged their children, who let all this sort of crazy, who sort of would tacitly, and this is true. On many occasions, I spent time on people's land, and it was the Duke of so-and-so's land. It was the Viscount so-and-so's land, and they turned a blind eye to it because their daughter was in it. Their son was part of it. So there were quite a few people from relatively august backgrounds on the festival scene along with everybody else. I mean, it was very egalitarian. It wasn't like there wasn't really a snobbery involved. There was a bit. You used to get a bit of an attitude from some people who lived on the road totally, who
Right.
never came off. There was a bit of an attitude, but not really much. It was very much live and let live. They were only too happy to have new people arrive. So by 1983.
Well, I think in one of the stories you had told me, your friend described it as there are no rules, but everybody follows them.
Oh, that's from Glastonbury Festival, 1986, the Greenfield.
Right.
Yeah. With the future Archbishop of Canterbury talking to us at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd all been tripping all Saturday night, and he came into what's called the Greenfield, which is where the festival people were. And it was like him and his cassock, and two guys cassocked up as well with him. And he's talking to us, and he said, this is interesting. There's a very different energy in this field, isn't there? It's like you come through the gate, it's like it's completely different energy. And I was kind of talking to him, and my friend Brian, sadly now passed, just turned around to him and said, yes, that's because there are no rules, but everybody abides by them.
Right.
Which was incredibly deep and very true, actually.
Right.
So this is where the trouble really came. I think I've shown you a picture from. I think I've shown you this. I would suggest if you've got whatever search engine you use, put in Stonehenge 1984 and look for images of Stonehenge 1984, and you will see something which I believe was what finally sealed the fate, which is what turned something which was we were referred to as medieval brigands and outlaws, which didn't do any help because that just made us look even bloody cooler than we were. Because that just made every kid, every 15-year-old kid go, I'll go in there. You know what I mean? I'm off. So medieval brigands and outlaws, I'm going. So which didn't help.
Right.
But if you look at this photograph from 1984, what you will see is there's approximately 50,000 people's tents and things. It covers almost up to the horizon. But what you will notice is it's like spokes of a wheel.
Mm-hmm.
In all this sort of natural chaos, there's no organisation. Nobody's organising this. There's like a central spoke around Stonehenge. We're all on one side. So we're not camping on Stonehenge itself. And they're like spokes of a wheel going off with avenues, which allow, if there's anything that goes wrong, any emergency services can get in and thing. Nobody planned that. That's just natural.
Wow.
But if you let people look after themselves, they're nowhere near as daft as you think they are.
Right.
And even though we're all out of the tits, I'm not going to claim anything else. Everybody's outrageously off their heads on anything you can think of. So, but there was still that instinctive thing, and people, without anybody telling to us, would say, "Don't park there. You're blocking a route."
Yeah.
If anything happens, we can get an ambulance on site. So there were you could get to any part of the festival with a fire truck or an ambulance. But nobody
that's really
organised.
interesting, that's really interesting in the Arisian sense of like Hodge versus Podge. The more Greyface tries to impose rules, the more you end up with tragic consequences, because there's going to be chaos anyway. But sometimes when you just let chaos coalesce into a form, it ends up becoming order, right? So,
and I think Thatcher saw that because it's a photograph it's obviously taken from an aircraft. I would imagine it's a news service. And the other thing was, news about festivals tended to be, there wasn't much about it on the TV. If it was anti it. It was portrayed us as we're all wasters, we're all druggies and all this sort of shit. But news companies from abroad found that they could sit and talk to people, and they'd have incredibly intelligent conversations with people at festivals. They might be out the tits, but they were quite happy to talk about various, on a deep level. And we were getting good press. If you went to Holland, or you went to Germany, or even in the States, there was interviews with us that were shown on various news channels, and it gave a completely different idea of what the people in Britain thought of us. The picture of what was being sold to the people in the UK. And obviously they were monitoring this. And I think in '84, it is said that we had there was a thing called the miners' strike in Britain, where virtually all the coal miners in Britain were out on strike for, I think it was 2 years almost. So virtually all the police in Britain that were spare for crowd control were used to control the miners' strike, because there was a thing called the Battle of Orgreave Coal Year, if you look that up. Terrible stuff went down. And it was said that they would have smashed Stonehenge in '84 had they had the police available, but they weren't. So by '85, which is the Battle of the Beanfield, which is what I sent you the photographs of yesterday. If people want to look this up, just look up the Battle of the Beanfield, 1985, Wiltshire. And I'll give a shout out to Alan Lodge, who's a brilliant photographer, who has pretty much he's the photographic historian of the festival scene. He was roughly, I think he's maybe a year older than me, so he only goes back to about 1976. But his archive is well worth an investigation if you want to kind of look at what people, what this is all about. But in 1980,
those photos in that collection that you sent me really kind of tell a story, because it's like I was describing earlier. It's just, you see these vehicles and there's so many of them, and it's just like a whole bunch of hippies and then a whole bunch of cops. And I think at the battle of the Beanfield, there's over 500 people were arrested.
Oh God, yeah. Well, it's long been claimed that somebody was killed.
Right, and then it was kind of hushed up.
Well, the story goes, and funnily enough, this came up on Facebook a couple of years ago on one of the anniversaries of the Beanfield, and it was his sister. They say that what happened was somebody got hit really badly, was taken to hospital, and they were put in a military hospital. So they weren't they were taken to a military, because he's Salisbury Plain. It's where all the military are. So they were taken to a military hospital. The guy wasn't well. He slipped into a coma and apparently died about 3 months later. But he was told that he'd been involved. His family were told after 3 days after the Beanfield, I think they contacted his family and said, "Oh, he's been in an accident. He's got head injuries." But they knew he was in the Beanfield, and there was a gap between the Beanfield and then him turning up supposedly having had this accident. And then it was all hushed up. They reckon that basically they weren't allowed to see him for a couple of weeks. And then when they were allowed to see, I think he was transferred to a normal hospital.
So he was accidentally beaten with a police baton, probably.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't know if there's any truth in that, but I've certainly seen that. I've seen the family claim that they believe that it happened at the Beanfield, that he didn't have an accident at all, that he was basically hit with a truncheon. So that sort of obviously put a kibosh on things. But there's one thing I had after I had it. It became its own success to a certain extent. You see, the original idea that Penny Rambo and that Wally Hope had, and we'll come back to Wally because we need to talk about Wally again, was that people all over England should go to stone circles and hold their own festival. That was really what it was all about. It wasn't like, oh yeah, let's get 200,000 people at Stonehenge once a year. Right. The whole idea was that every weekend during the summer, at every stone circle in Britain, there'd be a gathering for people. Mm-hmm. And there was a sort of, don't get me wrong, there was underneath this, there was this sort of hippie idealist thing that they could raise a certain sort of energy that would change the country into a nicer place. Christ almighty, not having that. You know what I mean?
Well, it seemed to me that there was, it seemed to me that there was a real mix of personalities involved in this.
Oh God, yeah.
Where some of them were kind of pagans, like out of the pagan revival, and a lot of magical ideas, and I think you had described it at one point as some of them literally trying to hail flying saucers in the fields at night.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Right, of
Yeah,
course, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Sky watching was. I mean, I collected that. I've got it here. There we go. Lenny Hurt. This is more a Power of the Stones. In '83, I was perfectly healthy, 26 years, but hardly ever got periods. Henge '83, I got one. Very surprised and unprepared. I'd no more till, as a joke, I took a Tampax with me to Henge '84, and it happened again. And May '85, my daughter was born. Never underestimate Mother Nature and their helpers.
wow.
There you go.
Wow.
And of course, as our favourite one was the rope.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what. Hang on, let me look. There we go. Tim Rundle. This is from Stonehenge, 1976. So this is like in the early days. Very hot day, clear, deep blue sky, no cloud. A child hands me a roll of string which goes up into the sky. My arm can feel the resistance of a large kite, but my eyes following the string upwards cannot see any such thing. Just the white string eventually disappearing into blueness. I hold the string for ages and start reeling it in. After 10 minutes or so, the resistance is the same, the sky is the same, and there's still no kite visible. I continue reeling it in with no apparent effect, even getting other people to confirm that the string just goes up into the eternal blue and nothing seems to be on the end of it. After 45 minutes or so, I find some likely looking candidate and hand them the string with an admonishment not to let him out. After all, we don't know what's on the other end. He might come crashing down. It might be depending on us. It might be depending on it. What if it is actually flying us? I still wonder what happened. Is someone still holding the string? Even now, I certainly hope so.
Right.
And of course,
I love that story.
We then sort of find that rope story is repeated in history and across the world. It's not an unusual story at all.
Right. Yeah. I ended up finding a bunch of them and writing about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, it appears in and the same thing appears in Endless, The Endless.
Yep.
What's the name? Benson and Moorhead film, The Endless. The string things in that. What's a rope in that? It's a very great big rope.
Yeah.
They're hanging on to. So there was this whole sort of undercurrent of weirdness. Don't get me wrong. And people used to laugh at us. Don't get me wrong. Again, but like I say, I think in the end, the whole idea of people getting on and just enjoying each other and just enjoying each other's company was not one that they could live with. I mean, that probably sounds a bit corny, but I'm sorry, but it's true. It really was just about, these people are enjoying it. Loads of people, particularly young people, are being drawn to this. I mean, it's funny, but when we talk about woke, this is it. This was a tiny percentage of people in 1980, in the early 1980s, who felt like that. I'm sure there was a lot of people who instinctively felt like that, but couldn't express it because of the society we lived in. And if you told me that the way we were, and the way we acted, and the way that we thought would be mainstream thought across the whole of Western Europe, Western civilization, by the time I've retired, I would have laughed at it and said, "Can I have some of what you're smoking? Because that's really good stuff, obviously."
Oh, right.
So I am genuinely.
With Thatcher in charge at the time, it's like
exactly, yeah. So I'm delighted, but I am genuinely. I thought it would take a good. I mean, we'd sit around a campfire at night talking about this sort of shit, and we used to say, a couple of 100 years time, maybe. Yeah. I think many of us now we're absolutely gobsmacked. It happened in our lifetime that it's become mainstream.
Yeah.
So I think maybe that's why they really so looking back, that's why they crushed it.
Yeah. Well, it was very much communal living, that was proving itself to be.
And don't get me wrong, though. Don't get me wrong, that arseholes at festivals just the same as there are anywhere.
Right.
but they were kept in check for. It was interesting how easily they were kept in check by people just being decent. And that's fascinating. That just people, by the very dint of most people being decent, it kind of made them embarrassed about acting like that. Don't get me wrong, there were still thieves, there was still, but the other thing was, and this comes back to the whole gender thing, really. You could walk around naked and nobody batted an eyelid. Right. It wasn't seen as a sexual, the whole sexuality thing. And the other thing I remember, and this is, because Burning Man really comes out of this. This is where Burning Man got was inspired. This is where the Burning Man was originally inspired from. But the thing I always remember was, after you've been at a festival for about 24 hours, there's a whole load of paranoia vanished that you never even realised that you had until you went to a festival. And I think that was dangerous, because people would say that people would come from a town and then maybe spend a couple of nights at the festival, had never been to a festival before, and they'd have this sort of view that, oh, they're all weird, they're all going to, there'll be orgies going on. And of course, there wasn't. You know what I mean? It was actually, by most people's standards, probably pretty boring. A few bands and lots of people talking and taking drugs. But people would suddenly say to you, "It's really strange, isn't it? I feel completely relaxed. This is the first time ever."
Right.
And I think that was saying, that is dangerous. Because post 85, we actually did a lot of very small festivals, which were brilliant. There'd be like 40, 50 people there. And often what would happen is, I remember we did one in the middle of literally middle of bloody nowhere in Wales. And,
so is this with the dogs?
Yeah. One of our very first ever festivals. And it was you have forestry land, and they often have these things. It's like it's like what it looks like a frying pan. So it's a road that goes a straight thing into the forest. Then there's a huge round circle at the end where the trucks can turn round and come back out when they're carrying when they're logging. But they make brilliant campsites. So what you'd have is you'd have maybe 20 or 30 vehicles just on the pan, all parked facing inwards. At the end, you'd have a little stage, band would play, and there'd be about 40, 50 people there. But on several occasions at these little festivals, which is what it really always about, was to try and get everybody to do this wherever you were, the locals would turn up. I remember one, there was a Saturday, it was a Saturday evening, about 6 o'clock, and I think it was late May, early June. And these locals turned up, and a few people were like, oh, Christ, are we going to get heavy here? They're going to threaten us. They're going to threaten violence.
Right.
And these locals walked in. Excuse me. We're like, oh yeah, very polite. We've got a whole row. We've got a pig. Would it be okay to bring it in? I know a lot of you are vegetarian, but would it be okay to bring it in and roast it and bring a few of the locals in, and we could all have a party tonight? I know there's a band playing, isn't there? I'd be like, yeah, cool. So, and before you know it, there's like all the people from the local pub are sitting in the circle around, chatting with everybody, having a joint and what have you. Say, oh, this is brilliant. It's really enjoyed this. We did a Timberland Festival in 87, 88. I can't remember. It's the old thing. If you can remember, you weren't there. We had an embedded journalist. And I always remember this. Again, this comes back to what they were scared of. So Timberland's, I think it's basically Black Mountain in Wales. It's one of Black Mountain in Wales. It's the sort of thing that Jimmy Page used to write acoustic songs about. But it's a big flat top mountain, and it looks down the valleys, goes all the way to the sea. When it's clear, you can see all the way down the valleys to the sea. But it's pretty bleak, as you can imagine. And it was pissing it down. We got there on the Friday evening. Somebody came out on a motorbike and was guiding people in because the weather was that foul. So we get to this festival and we got this embedded journalist with us writing an article about festival people. And when his article actually came out, and he made quite a bit of money out of it, he sold it across the world, this article. He said the thing that shook him, he said, all of a sudden I'm in a van driving through the countryside with a load of weird people who are all smoking drugs while they're driving, and you might think this is mad. But he said the thing that blew him away was we got to a festival site and it was just getting to dusk. And he said within half an hour in the pouring rain, I'm sitting inside a completely dry bender, which is what we used to erect, drinking a fresh cup of tea with these people, realizing that amazing, this is the middle of nowhere, and yet this is civilization.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's pouring with rain, but I'm dry and I'm drinking tea with them. And they're acting like this is nothing. You know, so yeah, it's just par for the course. And he did that article, as I say, he sold that to quite a few newspapers abroad and whatever. But again, it was this thing about people making decisions for themselves, on behalf of themselves, and not being idiots.
Right.
And I say that was always the danger. And we all saw that. The drug taking and everything, if they could sell that to people, it was great. But when people actually met us, like in 87, Stonehenge 87, when they tried to get to the Stones, there was a riot again. One of our band flattened a copper. Yeah, I'll never forget that. He was attacking a woman, and he was attacking a woman who was holding the kid. So one of our band literally, I just saw him go flying through the air, side on, because he did martial arts, took his copper out, swallowed his back, flattened it. I thought, oh, here we go. We're in the police sale now, because I'm not going to let him get beaten up for doing that. But another couple of coppers saw what happened. And again, it comes back to this: don't mess with festival people, because there's a good chance, one, the parents are connected. Dad could be an incredible lawyer. You do not want to go up against them in court, because you'll lose.
Right.
Because the judge will believe them if their father's that sort. You know what I mean? It's that snobbery. Right. But that's the British class. It's the same in the States. If you've got money, going to court's completely different to if you're poor. You know, we all know that. So, where was I talking about? 87 Stonehenge. Yes, we were all camped up in a woodland about 3 miles from the Stones. And I remember as we left, we'd been there for about a week. There was a news people interviewing some of the locals about, oh, you know, what's it been like having all these people camped in the woods near you? And this woman was going, she pointed over to the road where the road turns into a track before it goes into the wood. And she points over, and there's literally a pile of black bin bags that's like about 10 feet tall by about 15 feet wide. She goes, they've cleaned everything out. That place was a mess. They've cleaned everything. They've not only bought their own rubbish out, they've cleaned everybody else's rubbish who thinks they can just dump anything in those woods, sort of thing. So as far as I'm concerned, they can stay here as long as they like. And this sort of reporters going, oh, okay, well, we don't want to talk to you. So, because there was this thing about Glastonbury. The festival people used to get let in free to Glastonbury because they did the clean-up afterwards. Because Glastonbury just looks like a massive rubbish dump the day after its festival. And the festival people used to get free entrance for cleaning up afterwards. I used to take 2 or 3 days. It was about self-reliance and self-discipline. And this is the whole thing, you know, the whole sort of attitude towards people like you and I and all our friends is, oh, you've got no self-discipline. But the truth is we do. It might be a different
responsibility.
We might, yes, yeah. My responsibility was, if I see somebody trying to chop down fresh wood off a tree, I'll go up to them and say, look, kid, it won't burn. Green wood won't burn. Find the old stuff. And that's, do you know what I mean? Rather than just going, oh, you, what the fucking hell are you doing? You talk to them. Right. Hey, like I say, there are arseholes at festivals like us. When you've got 50,000 people, you're going to get a couple of hundred people who are complete twats. You know what I mean? Just by the law of averages. So they were kept. But they were kept far more. You know what I mean? But their behaviour was emulated by everybody else being quite decent to each other. That's it. Later on, you then get the sort of acid house craze with raves, and a lot of the original raves were actually organised by teenagers of festival people, the kids of festival people's teenage kids. I mean, one of the biggest raves in Britain was in a fire station in London, and the guy running it was 14 clown. That the person running it was 14, and his folks were part of what's called the Mutoid Waste Company. If people want to look up the Mutoid Waste Company, they do. If you ever see pictures of Glastonbury and you see lots of weird sort of sculptures made of weird, lots of metal and stuff, that's usually the Mutoid Waste Company. They do a lot of stuff for sets and what have you for films. I think they did some of the Mad Max stuff as Mutoid Waste. I think some of the trucks in those were designed by the Mutoid Waste Company. So you know what I mean? People made a living out of being on the festivals and all that sort of thing. But with the rave culture, unfortunately, that brought in a genuine criminal element. And I'm talking organised crime, organised criminal gangs who sort of saw what was going on. Thought, oh, there's a lot of money to be made here. And there was. I mean, I've always said the ultimate Thatcherite drug was ecstasy. Because you could go to Holland and buy ecstasy for 3p a tab over the counter. And the people were charging 25 quid a tab in the UK. You get literally, you just go over literally get on a boat, go to Holland and buy it for threepence a tab because it's used for treating alcoholism. Funnily enough, it's a mood enhancing thing. And also, I sort of ducked out in 1990 when a friend of mine was sexually assaulted at a festival, and that was it for me. I was like, no. That I'd never. I mean, there were stories of there were some weird people at festivals in the 70s and 80s, but nothing like that. To assault somebody at a festival now, you'd have been severely dealt with. I mean, you would have got a damn good kicking if anybody had done that at a festival in 1982, and somebody had said something. That would have been it. Whoever it was would have been. I wouldn't want to have been to them. Because they would have got they would have ended up in hospital. I can guarantee you that. But by the late 80s, sadly, there was a sort of thug element thing, which is sad because 90% of ravers, vast majority of people in the rave say lovely people, great people, just there for a good laugh, have a good time, and not harm anybody. But like I say, there was a sort of laddish element, this sort of birth of the laddish thing. The birth of this whole Andrew Tate fucking fuckwitchery sort of thing. There was people like that sort of thing who were just predatory. And to me, that was like, I don't want to be part of that. That's fuck it. I'm sorry, but I'm walking away from this now. Yeah, the mates of mine still had some great times, but the staying overnight, staying in the field for 3 or 4 days. No, it was more like have a weekend over the Saturday night. That'd be cool. But and of course they changed the law to make it illegal you can't park more than 4 vehicles in a field. You can't, without written permission, without having a license for a festival, whatever, sort of thing. Can't remember the name of the act, but they made it virtually possible. When the famous Castle Morton, the last great sort of free festival was also a rave called Castle Morton, and they even lied about that. They said, "Oh, we've had umpteen noise complaints." Yes, they did. They were all about the police helicopters incessantly flying around the bloody local villages. It wasn't about the festival. It was about the bloody police helicopters, 24 hours a day, overhead sort of thing. That was the noise complaints, but that was our fault apparently. So the Castle Morton was probably the last great free festival in Britain, and huge numbers have decamped to Europe. There's whole villages in Portugal that are ex-festival people. The original people are all in their 80s now, late 70s, 80s years old. So but a lot of them retired to. There's little villages in Portugal that have died because nobody wanted to live there because there's no facilities. Well, the festival people, they just rolled up. Yeah, we'll live here. I always say, if you want to know how things have changed in 50 years, you've seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Yeah. In fact, the second one of the series, a few dollars more. Mm-hmm. That little white village, That was what it looked like. That wasn't a set. They didn't build that. That's what that bloody village looked like in 1966. And it
Wasn't
still
that Italy
does.
though?
And it's still there. If you look at it up on YouTube, there's a guy who goes around all the spaghetti western sites, what they look like now. The western town has been preserved. It's really funny because it's all got gardens in the sort of main street with all the sort of saloons and stuff. They've all got front gardens now. Looks really weird. So people still live there. But that's what it looked like. So it was quite primitive. I mean, obviously they got, it's all got email and shit now. But a lot of the festival people, to them, that's perfect, because the locals didn't want to live there, so they moved there. So from about late 80s onwards, lots of people from the festival scene moved abroad. I mean, the dogs, we nearly bought a village in Spain. We nearly bought an entire village in Spain. And looking back, we made a serious mistake because we didn't realise, well, it was, I think at the time, it was £98,000. And we'd spoken to a couple of people around the band who were like, actually, we can make a go of this, I think. I'm like, really? Seriously? They said, yeah, what you go? What we didn't realise was this village came with 100 acres of olives. No, 200 acres of olives. If we bothered to look it up, the yearly yield on 200 acres of olives is like about £150,000.
Yeah.
But we didn't realise this. So basically, we could have paid for the whole bloody thing in the space of about 3 years. All we had to do was rent it out to the farmers and take a cut. Say to the farmers, we'll split it 60-40 or whatever. You can have 40% of the profits. If you look after that, that would have been 50 grand a year. So that was a silly mistake we made. But the idea was to move over there and build a studio in the village, sort of thing. And we'd have, each member of the band would have a house. So they go, the crew and everybody. But we seriously thought about it. We were 1988, 89. We genuinely thought. But of course, that village is now probably about 5 or 6 million. Sort of thing, because that's the way things have gone. You know what I mean? There's no place that's not accessible in Europe now, and there's Wi-Fi there. Yeah, and Wi-Fi's turned everywhere into being accessible. There's very few places in Europe that doesn't have broadband. So even in back end of nowhere in Portugal and Spain, because like I say, watch those. If you watch the spaghetti westerns, the classic trilogy, that's what it bloody looked like. That's Spain in the 1960s. Sorry, go.
Yeah, I was just backtracking a little bit. When did you go from a festival goer to somebody that was playing at the festivals, or were you always playing? I'm just looking for a little history on your band,
StarDoG. StarDoG's first festival was Port Meadow, which is a really famous place in Oxford. Port Meadow Festival, that was our first festival. And one of our lighting crew came up to us afterwards and goes, well, that's weird. I looked at him and goes, what? He says, you're not my friends anymore now, you're a bloody cult. I said, you what? He said, you're a cult. He said, everybody out there is just like, wow, you just blew everybody away that night. And we played with a band called the Cardiacs. I actually did a cartoon stunt at that festival. Never forgotten it. My friend had a post office van. A post office vans are really strange. There's a door, but the door's about 5 feet up the side of the van. So it's got those insert footsteps that you go up. You have to sort of put your foot in. Open the door, climb in. So we got a call, you're on stage. I was like, oh, right, okay. And I've never been particularly powders person. I've never done coke, never really done speed. But I took some speed that night for some reason, don't know why. Sort of thing. So I was a bit saying, oh, all right, we're on. So I opened the door. This is like I say, it's about it's 4 or 5. The door's 4 or 5 feet up the side of the van. I opened the door, misjudged it, and did a perfect Wile E. Coyote. Swung on the door, slammed straight into the side of the van, like arms akimbo, and slid down the van, much to the amusement of everybody watching. Oh, that was really clever. Can you do that again? sort of thing. But I'm so buzzing. I'm just like, let's go.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably weren't feeling any pain, so it's...
No, didn't feel a damn thing. But literally, it was a total, literal, the one cartoon moment of my life.
Oh,
that was the first
that's funny.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
But that was Tube the Dog's first festival, and by the end of September '85, I think we played 7, and then '86 we played. If there wasn't really a festival, we didn't play. '87 was when we first met Dave Brock from Hawkwind. I told you about the meeting when we first met, when Dave first introduced himself to us. We were sitting around the campfire. This was the Rollright Stones Festival, 1987. Wasn't very particularly nice. In fact, it was foul weather. I forgot that. Yeah, the famous, we played the fucking storm. And the day after, the weather had calmed down a bit. We're sitting around the campfire, and Dave Brock from Hawkwind walks into the middle of the campfire, and he's got a kettle in his hand. He's like, anybody want to do some mushrooms? Like, yeah, okay, fair enough. So Dave sits down, and I'm having this conversation with Dave, and there's a friend of mine sitting between us as we're talking. And my mate's tripped out of his tits. He keeps grabs hold of me and goes, Steve, I know him, don't I? Yeah. What do you call it? So me and Dave carry on talking. Steve, I recognise him. Who is he? So I was pointing at Dave. I was like, it's Dave Brock. About 10 minutes, Steve, I really fucking, who the fuck is this? What's he doing sitting in that fire? Because I'm sure I bloody know him from somewhere, but I can't put a bloody name to his face. And Dave just burst out laughing. And at that point, he goes, by the way, I want you to tour with us in the autumn if you're interested. I'd like you to come and tour with us. And I was like, yeah. And everybody around the camp went, really? But we played, and I'm not joking, we had to put plastic sheeting over all the PA because literally we were playing into the teeth of the gale. I'll never forgot.
Bad.
There was a guy, there were still people out there standing in the pouring rain watching us. There was a guy under the plastic sheeting in one of the bass bins who spent the whole gig just rolling one joint after another because it was dry and passing it out. So about every 2 minutes, every 5 minutes or so, this hand would appear. So here's another one. But funnily enough, it was a really good gig. And people after said, I said, bloody hell, man, it was pouring. You were standing there, oh yeah, who cares? So I just took all my clothes off and got on the bus afterwards. We got a fire going, so we cared. But it was a brilliant thing to be around. It's a one-off. It was one of Rutger Hauer's moments in time. That period, between say 72 and 88, you had that sort of 16-year period, but it set the tone. And the residences that we started, a lot of what goes down today, that came from our original. I think we set up the residence that helped, we weren't revolutionaries in a sense, and yet we were. And it was like I say, it was the whole thing about live and let live. Right. If people aren't harming you, just fucking go and get on with it. It's up to them what they do. So, and more and more people sort of took that on board. So to the extent now that I talk to people, in the 20s, and it's like talking to festival people from the 1980s, the way they act. And I'm like, wow, that's so fucking cool. But I can see why we've got such a kickback against it.
Right.
Because you can see it's all drifting that way. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the latest thing is, the new generation, they like religion. The new generation don't like woke, you lying fuckers. They don't. You're just lying through your teeth. You're just trying to make shit up now because you've lost. And that fat fucking nonce and I don't usually fat shame people, but in his case I will, that fat fucking nonce in the White House, he's the last of a dying breed.
Yeah.
Because when the fucking kickback comes from at the end of this, it's going to be far worse than they ever fucking thought. And it's the same in the UK. They've got to kill these people who think who think they're on a fucking roll. They ain't. They ain't. They
Well,
ain't.
it's a pendulum. It's a pendulum.
Yeah.
The pendulum swings both ways.
Yes. Yeah. And the funny thing is, they're the ones who are, I never genuinely felt oppressed. I never really felt oppressed because if you're free in your own mind, you don't really. You feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I said to you, you go to a festival, and I have numerous people say this to me. Wow, I just feel so relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things was, you're having a smoke, nobody's going to bust you.
Right.
We're talking about shit that maybe most of a lot of your friends don't want to talk about because it's too deep. Oh man, that's deep. Don't want to talk about that.
Right.
So you go to the festival, you sit around the fire, and suddenly somebody says to you, "So what do you think?" And people are asking you your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
Well,
they don't want your opinion. You know what I mean? They don't want you to have an opinion, let alone voice it.
Yeah,
that's what
it's
really all about.
It's direct human interaction that doesn't exist in like a proper setting. And especially if you're of the ilk that thinks they're better than because of what family they came from or how much money they've had. It's not about human connections at all. It's just about winning. It's just about being on the top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we'll have to go back to Wally Hope because he died in 1975.
Yeah.
In quite tragic circumstances. He was busted for supposedly possession of a couple of tabs of acid.
Right.
And they sent him to a mental home. He was placed in a mental home. He suffered what's that called? Dyskinesia, where you got the facial tics and everything. Dyskinesia. Right. What do you call it? He suffered from that when he came out because of the medications they gave to him. And he supposedly committed suicide. Now, I've heard stories that Penny Rambo has always insisted he was murdered by the state. And I always just think, really? Come on. You know what I mean? I mean, that's stretching it a bit far. I mean, it was just one person. What I didn't know was at 30 years old, he stood to inherit an absolute fortune from an uncle.
Oh.
So he'd have had the financial wherewithal to put behind 3 festivals. That was obviously what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there was a bit of jiggery pokery going on there.
Yeah.
I don't know. But it's only in researching this recently that I found out that he had an uncle, somebody Nags, I think his name was, who left him a fortune in perpetuity until he was 30 years old. And on his 30th birthday, he had access to a large amount of money. So wow. maybe there was a bit, that maybe somebody else who stood to inherit was quite happy to go along with, he needs silence, and yeah, you're right. So why should that fucking hippie get all the money? So there might well have been something going on there. But I'd always heard that Wally died, Wally killed himself, and that a couple of people thought it was a bit suspicious. But I didn't realise until they did some research. Like I say, he had this relative. And again, we come back to this, what I was saying about Thatcher hated these sort of upper middle class dilettantes, as she saw them, because they, who indulged their children. And by indulging their children, they set a bad example for the working class. That whole bloody thing, basically. But again, you could probably tie this Crowley, similar sort of thing. Yeah. His family owned a big brewing company. And
Yeah,
yet they were the Methodists, weren't they? So it's kind of weird because they didn't drink, but they owned a brewery.
they were Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah. So they didn't
Yeah,
drink, but they owned a brewery. Illogical. No wonder he was fucked up. So, but I mean, kind of, if you look back to the 1920s, God, what are they called? Virginia Woolf, Keynes,
the
Keynes,
Bloomsbury Group.
Bloomsbury Group. Yeah, Bloomsbury
Yeah,
Group. I would say the Bloomsbury Group were the sort of first kindling, and I would imagine I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people from the Wallys, I bet you somebody's related to one of them. You know what I mean? I just
yeah,
got a feeling that if you were to look up all the Wallys, one of them's probably Virginia Woolf's nephew. You know what I mean? Or Keynesian's nephew. Something like that. Wouldn't surprise me at all. And again, you know, my old mentor, Rex, I'd
yeah,
look back and I think Rex saw me as part of that. And therefore, I think that was the passing, we've spoken about this before, the passing of the mantle to,
right.
you know, the next generation was he saw that the dwarves and people like Wally were the next generation because they truly were open-minded. And that was a sweet
Yeah,
thing about it. I mean, you could say it was naive, and it was. Don't get me wrong, I'm not totally unaware. It was incredibly naive in many ways, but that naivety protected us in a sort of weird sort of way as well. It was also our protection. It was
yeah,
nice to be, you know, it's kind of weird because you were both, because in one sense you were kind of very married. You know what I mean? We had some incredibly deep conversations, particularly about, you know, weird shit. Like I say, you
yeah.
know, I collected the weird shit from people. I mean, let's see what else we've got. uh, this is from Jem Sugarshine. Once when I was walking to Stonehenge, I woke up in a crop circle and couldn't stop laughing. Another time, the sky was taken up by a huge black cow goddess, and I asked why, despite shedding leather for my shoes were so crap, and the sky boomed, clogs! Being a little taken back by this, I wandered off site to Amaral, came upon a strange burnt out cottage, inside of which was a huge exploded cauldron, and miraculously, two fine pairs of clogs, one of which fitted me perfectly.
One of which? Oh, one pair. Okay.
One pair, yeah.
I
Well,
was, I was looking.
that would have that would have been the ultimate Erisian thing, wouldn't it? Only one of them fitted. The ultimate
Well,
Erisian.
didn't you have a missing time experience going from one festival site to another?
That was actually that was for Cradle Hill. You know, you
Okay.
passed me the things the other day. The Cradle and Star Hill, which are the famous ones in Warminster. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were 10 of us. Jerry was driving. I don't think Jerry was tripping. Everybody else was tripping, apart from a girl called Jill, who's actually the granddaughter of one of the most famous. You know her great grandmother. Virtually anybody who's into art who knows her great grandmother. It was I can't think of her bloody name. She was the redhead in a lot of the pro-Raphaelite paintings. She's the witch, Morgana. She's Morgana in one of the. That was her great grandmother.
Oh. Okay.
And we dropped acid at Cradle Hill. I'd had the incident with the guy I was talking to, and this is what I say when people say, "Oh, acid," you know, no, you questioned everything. That was the incident I had when we were sky watching and looking at the sky, and I was talking to this black boy. It was a local, actually. I said, "Yeah, well," I said, "Well, a lot of people mistake." I said, "People get mistake, you know, satellites. They say satellites think it's a bloody UFO, don't they?" And I pointed up. I said, "Just like that one up there." And it looked like a satellite coming. It was coming sort of, let's see, north to south. Yeah, in fact, yeah, it's unusual. North to south, north to south. Pointed up. Yeah. And as we both pointed up at this satellite, it just shot left turn and went over the horizon at about fucking God knows how many thousand miles an hour. And this bloke just looked at each other in the dark. Well, yeah, there you go. So I think, interesting. Maybe. So later that night, towards dawn, we said, we'll get Stonehenge for the dawn. So we all piled in the van. The first weird thing that happened was We come down off Star Hill, and all of a sudden it's what the bloody hell? And a sleeping policeman in the road. And somehow we're driven onto bloody army base. There's always army houses and everything. And there's this bunch of hippies in the truck driving through the middle of this army base, and nobody takes it. We drive out of the gates and nobody stops us. Nobody takes a blind bit of notice of us. So it's like, oh, we're obviously invisible now.
Right.
So we hit the road to Stonehenge, and I've told you this before, for 40 years, I never looked it up. But we hit the road for Stonehenge. So like Jerry's driving, there are 9 of us in the back, 8 of us tripping, and then I'm sitting at the back of the van with my back against the doors, and everybody fell asleep in the van, apart from Jerry, who's driving, and me. And all of a sudden, we're in a fog. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I think it's what, 9, 10, 11 miles between here and Stonehenge. I'm thinking, okay, I'm tripping, so time gets fucked up. So I think, hang on, this is weird. And after about 5-10 minutes, and I know it's 5-10 minutes because Jerry got some music on, and I know the length of the songs that we're listening to, I kind of climbed up the van, crawled into the front seat, said to Jerry, how long have we been driving? And he looks at me and goes, I don't know, it must be about half an hour. And I'm thinking, we're doing about 45, 50 miles an hour down the one road that leads, there is only one road that goes to Stonehenge.
Yeah, there's no roads you could have turned off on. Yeah.
No, there isn't, that's the point. On that particular route, there isn't. So I'm looking at them going, we should have been there about 10 minutes ago. And we're going through this fog, and it's another 15 minutes before we get to Stonehenge. And we pull up, and there is a couple that messed me up. Oh, doing people with the trip. So we get out the van, and there's a ward there with the uniform on. And we all walked up to it, and we're all standing in Indian file. So this board and stuff, this is like 4 o'clock in the bloody morning. I mean, obviously, that's quite Stonehenge being Stonehenge, it's not unusual. But what is a bit weird is there's a warden here. There's me and Jerry standing talking to him. There's everybody else is lined up in a neat line behind them, like we're at a school trip, sort of thing. Right. But, you know, this is like a load of 6-foot fucking hippies. And we're looking over at the stones, and Jerry says to me, he says, hang on a minute, they're fucking shimmering, aren't they? I went, yeah, they are. And we turned around and asked everybody else, the stones, oh, look at the stones. And everyone went, oh, they're shimmering. And then we look around, there are rocks, there's a couple of stones, you know, there's a stone fence and stuff around this thing. So we looked at them thinking, oh, maybe it's heat coming, some sort of weird heat thing. So we looked at it, we were looking at it, looked back to the stones, and the stones were just as if we're in a heat haze around the stones. So that was a bit weird. Got in the van, we drove home. But I never, for some reason, ever wanted to look back at that because I knew there was about 15, 20 minutes that was wrong in that fog. And it was only years later that, in fact, I remember talking to you. I went and looked at the map and looked up the route and thinking, well, maybe we did go off on the wrong route. No, it's 11 miles and it took us 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And we were doing 40, 45 miles an hour. That's impossible. Right. So there's 20 minutes missing somewhere. And like I say, the bit that always got me was everybody fell asleep apart from me and Jerry. It was like
so did they fall asleep when you hit the fog or before that?
Yes. Yeah. It was about probably a couple of minutes after we got into the fog. I looked round and everybody had fallen asleep. Everybody was like...
Yeah, that's strange.
Yeah.
I feel like that means something, but...
It's the only time... I mean, genuinely, and I remember thinking maybe it's the acid. I was convinced it was the acid, that I was getting that time dilation effect that you get on LSD at times. So I was thinking, oh, it's just that. Because the thing that always gets me about, acid, took acid. No, you actually you go through things with the minutiae of detail when you're on acid. You question everything. That's the whole point of doing it. So, you know what I mean? So, fully enough, you're actually far more strict with yourself about what reality is than you are when you're straight. I always say the UFO experiences, people who've done acid are far better at UFO experiences than people who are straight, because people who are straight believe everything they see with their eyes. If they see it with the eyes, they think it must have happened. People who've done acid don't. People who've done acid and get stoned, they think, hang on a minute. Double check. I'm double checking this because this could just be, I'm making this shit up in my own head. So you know what I mean? That's it's an interesting thing, isn't it? So when people say, "Oh, he's a police officer, he can be totally trusted," why? He's got no idea what an hallucination is.
Yeah.
No, as a guy who flies an aircraft, he's got no idea what a bloody hallucination is. He doesn't have any idea. He's not checking himself. He's not thinking, "Can I taste?" Because I always say, often with weird shit happens, you get a weird taste in your mouth, almost like you've touched the back, like you touched the battery terminals with the tongue.
Yeah, yeah.
You sometimes when weird shit's happening, you get that taste in your mouth. So it's obviously something to do with there is obviously a heavy electromagnetic charge that's been surrounding the incident, and you're part. You may.
I don't know that I've ever experienced that. You actually kind of get a metallic taste in your mouth.
Yeah. And funny enough, when you're tripping, often people say you get like a weird sort of metallic taste in the mouth, and people will eat suck a mint or something, then it blows their head off because the mint's like the mintiest thing you've ever fucking tasted in your life.
Yeah.
Wow, this mint is just fucking. But yeah, but I mean,
I don't know.
But that all comes back to that's kind of what the festivals was about. My friend Steve, the guy, absolutely, a genuine genius. The guy who built the Sims for Hawkwind in 1970. Used to love doing acid with him at festivals. He was just an awesome person. Straightest looking dude you've ever seen in your life. People say, "Oh, I bet he's a copper." They say, "Oh, yeah." I mean, the most obvious, that's a really clever thing that is for an undercover copper to come looking like the straightest bloke you've ever fucking met. So yeah, that's really clever undercover work, that is. So, shut up, you silly. So like I say, people can still be arseholes at festivals, But Steve, like I say, has amazing conversations. Then walking, so just walking around the festival site, just chatting about shit. And a couple of times, we had like my friend Dean he had that experience with the that was what's it called? Oh bloody hell! It's where my friends got stuck for the winter. The year before the dogs started, several of the dogs ended up spending the entire winter on Hay Bluff. It's called Hay on White, Hay Bluff. And a friend of mine, he had a really weird, him and his girlfriend. He's the guy who took the best photo I've ever seen of a UFO at a festival. And he was tripping. Everybody else who was straight is just lollygagging.
Yeah.
Oh, look, that's weird. He's like, I'm tripping. I'm probably making that up. Quick, get a bloody camera. He takes the photograph. Everybody else is, oh, fuck, he took a photo. Oh, he's the one going, I'm tripping. This might not be real. I better take a photo just to make sure and prove that, it's what you go. But after that, he ended up wandering off with his girlfriend, and they found this weird fucking thing on top of a hill that was like a radar thing sticking out of the hill. But when they approached it, it retracted back into the hill. And a sort of plate closed across it. And it's like, wow. He said, I thought, because his girlfriend wasn't tripping. And he said, I thought, oh God, I'm just making this up. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
She went, no, that just happened.
Well, see, that sounds like something. That sounds like something out of the Avengers or something like that.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Just that, yeah. So it's because he said it, I was thinking, this is really stupid, really cheesy, this can't be happening, sort of thing. But he said it was definitely, it was like this sort of radar display came out of the ground, sort of turned around several times. And they said it's almost like they saw them walking towards it and it's retreated. And said this, he walked up and there was like a steel thing across the little concrete thing, like a little concrete
Yeah, I can
circle.
picture it.
Yeah. So he was like, wow, that's fucking weird. But that area is, again, is MOD land. So there's a lot of MOD land around there. So it could well be some sort of, God knows what, probably it could even just be a TV and, you know what I mean, some sort of transmission thing for the army. I don't know, because that's where that famous incident with the orders to fire the broadside during the manoeuvres in 1964. There's whole army manoeuvres, and in the middle of these army manoeuvres, they're getting orders to fire broadsides, and that orders were from 1942.
Oh, right. The delayed radio transmission.
Yeah. The radio thing was just been bouncing around in the atmosphere for God knows how many years, and then they eventually picked it up. Sort of thing. It was literally they were getting the orders from and somebody actually tracked it down to a specific incident during World War II. Oh yeah, I remember that. So it's kind of magical. It was a magical place. People were looking for magic, on any sort of level. And I think a lot of people found it. Like the story when I first went to Glastonbury tour, I was with two friends. I was 18 years old. It was the summer of '76, the infamous British summer where it was like America. It didn't rain for 3 months and it was like 80 degrees every bloody day. We even had cricket at night, which I've never heard. You know what I mean? All night sort of cricket. So I went on a tour with a couple of mates because we'd finished school, we were all going to college. And I went on a tour for a week or so around a lot of the sort of sacred sites in Dorset and Somerset, maybe. Of course, we went to Glastonbury. I remember got on top of Glastonbury, got tall. Well, even in the summer, in the hottest days, there's still a wind up there because the tour's basically only about 10, 15 miles inland from the sea. So there's an onshore wind all the time. So when you get to the top of the tour, it's quite windy, even on the sunniest of days. So with my two friends, I told them, I said, I bet you when they used to have ceremonies up there, the wind used to drop. And as I said the word drop, the wind just went, stopped, dead. For about 30 seconds, then just started again. And I'll never forget my two mates just went, you're fucking weird. I just went, well, there you go. As you do.
Well, but, I mean, that does kind of allude to a question I was going to ask you, is that with this whole festival thing, I know there was kind of a mythology around, especially with Stonehenge being a prehistoric site, reclaiming it and having kind of like some people kind of jokingly associating it with like a pagan rite.
Yeah.
But others kind of more genuinely believing that. But do you see like that kind of communal exercise as being related to like the ancient festivals that or in the same spirit in some way, or some kind of modern continuation of like the Celtic and Druidic rites that would have happened for seasonal changes? And
I think yes, I think people celebrated the fact that they survived a year, that they prospered, and they got absolutely off the tits and had a good time. And the Abrahamic religions just can't handle that.
Right.
You know what I mean? The three great Abrahamic religions, like, I know you're not supposed to do that. It's like, what? You know what I mean? And that's the sort
I mean, I like to think back to, I like to imagine that when they first built Stonehenge, they had a big festival there. And that was Keith Richards' first gig.
Yeah. It was Keith's design. It's Keith's design. One of those is his original amplifier.
Yeah.
But we definitely did that. that morning, those stones were shimmering. There was some sort of energy coming off them. And that's the only time I've ever seen that stone. Because I find Stonehenge a bit sad now these days. It's like, it's a bit like that relative of yours who was an absolute nutter when they were young and who's sort of like falling on hard times. That's how I kind of view Stonehenge. Avebury, completely bloody different. Avebury's awesome. I would recommend Avebury to anybody. It's the most beautiful fucking place. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. I mean, I've been inside the Great Pyramid. I've been to Egypt. I've seen the Mausoleum. I've been to the Temple of Diana. I've seen all those places in Greece and what have you. But Avebury is just bloody awesome. It's just an awesome place to just go and be. And it's still not succumbed to tourism in the way that many other places have. Right. It ain't big enough to. And I think most people go, well, it's just a bunch of stones, so it kind of looks after itself in that sense, because the whole village is inside this circle. But particularly if you're female, it's just an amazing place. It's like connecting back to the very. So I don't know what they believed. Right. The latest evidence is that they were female, not dominated, but female based.
Right. Like a matriarchal society. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was effectively a matriarchal society. So from that point of view, I think Avebury is like it's like the biggest. It's like one of the Earth's wombs. Oh, that sounds really hippie. Well, it is. Fuck it. Wow. It's like one of the Earth's wombs, and it really does feel like there's a really sort of calming, beautiful sort of thing. The only people I know don't like Stonehenge are people I don't like. Isn't that interesting? Avebury are people I don't like.
Right.
That's fascinating. That. You know, the people who I just think a bit of a tosser, you know, bit of a wanker, twat, you fucking twat. But but that sort of whole festival. I mean, don't get me wrong. There was one festival, particularly this place called Cantling Stone in Wales. That almost certainly comes down to, you probably wouldn't have heard of it, there's a thing called Operation Julie, which I was kind of sort of peripherally involved with. Our house got busted under it in 1976. It's where the Clash song, Julie's been working for the drug squad, comes from, Operation Julie.
Right.
And it was a fuck up. Basically, the copper who ran it said, you know, of the 11 people they wanted, 9 of them left the country the week before it happened. So it's like this is what I mean. Thatcher, you look at that and you go, oh yeah, well, obviously somebody was talking. But that was about LSD. That was busting the LSD factories, and there was one in Wales. But the legend is there were 4 or 5 thermos flasks full of LSD, tablets of blotting paper LSD, were stashed in the forest near Cantling Stone. So the legend is that the festival was like, well, I'm a festival in Cantling Stone. And people just wander off into the woods looking, you know, looking for disturbed soil, sort of thing. Or they got metal detectors. And then the whole reason that the festival was out at Cantling Stone was because people were sure there was a hell of a lot of acid buried in the woods somewhere around there. I think it's an urban legend. I think it's probably just a way of getting people to go to a festival. I think it's just in the middle of bloody nowhere. So, but yeah, I mean, the Operation Julie was very real, and there was a dearth of acid for quite some time after it. But I mean, it's ridiculous. Hey, they made £5 million of acid. It's like, mate, they were giving them away. I mean, the whole point of the acid was half of it used to get given away, and they'd charge you 25p, which is like, you know, 10 cents the tab back in the day. I mean, Stonehenge 84. A classic example. On the night of the solstice, we were standing around the solstice, we were all standing around the stones, and there was people going around, and it was like, put your tongue out. Put your tongue out. You put your tongue out, then put a tab of acid on your tongue, go on, up to you if you swallow it or not, or keep it. And then literally, they must have given away, what, 700 or 800 fucking tabs of acid that night. So that's what I mean. How people, it's not really people making money out of it. So, the famous story about, I told you this one before, about we used to have this in our tour bus, and it was a headline from a local newspaper in Wiltshire. Hippies do foreign trade in stolen knives. Under which is a photograph of of a vendor with a big board outside of it. Hash, so and so, blah blah. Hot knives, 20 each. And of course, the paper thinks hot knives, stolen knives.
Yeah.
Hot knives is when you get two knives, you get a piece of hash, you put two knives in a fire, you put the hash between the two knives, burn it and inhale it. So I think it's a really good hit. No tobacco, so it's just that. That's what hot knives are. But it's like, hippies do roaring trade in stolen knives. So we used to have that.
Right.
That headline that used to be stuck on that used to be on our tour bus. So that's the sort of
yeah, that's hilarious.
Simple times. But this is it. You were living alongside and outside. Yeah. Now, virtually everything we got up to is mainstream. You know, people just go, yeah, you can do that down the side. Or you can go, you know, there's so meetings where they discuss that sort of stuff in the church hall on the Wednesday, you know. So yeah, which is kind of what it was all about. It was about spreading. I mean, we weren't like trying to spread a message. We're just trying to spread a vibe. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're trying to spread a vibe where you get off on it and you enjoy yourself, you have a good time. We're not telling you how to do it. And that was probably that was the victim of its own success with the festivals. Was that thing about the problem was that you get 250,000 people turn up at Stonehenge, but no, the whole idea was, 10,000 people at Stonehenge, 20,000 people at this stone circle, 20,000 people at this stone circle. That was what we really wanted on solstice. So it was unstoppable. There wouldn't be enough police to have to stop 250,000 people turning up at 10 different sites. That's what that's what we really wanted. We wanted people every weekend to go, you know, for people to be able to go to a local stone circle at any given weekend, and there'd be good people there. Because you don't, I mean, the Nazis tried to use it. There's a place called Nine Maidens where there's been serious trouble. I mean, this is going back 40 years ago. We had trouble with Nazis. They were trying to think, you know, because have you ever read the story about? You've not read Amado Crowley, have you?
No.
He tells a story about, there's a legend, and I think it is, I don't know if it's a legend or not, that Aleister Crowley performed a ceremony on behalf of the British government at the height of the Battle of Britain that involved a load of people in robes standing on clothes, giving it this to the, what's it called? Supposedly where he got the V from was supposedly from Crowley. But there's a legend that he performed this ceremony at a particular church somewhere in Surrey. And Amado claims that effectively that was a story put out to confuse the Nazis. Because he said for decades afterwards, little groups of Nazis would turn up at this church in Surrey thinking it was a thing, trying to perform this fucking ritual to try and exercise the power that Crowley had put to stop the Nazis taking over. So when there's been bloody Nazis around, you know what I mean? And like I say, you're going back 40 years to the Nine Maidens, we had trouble with Nazis on several occasions, to the point there was a bit of violence once, where we literally kicked them out. It was sort of, Thor and this, or piss off, you fucking idiots. So, and they got a bit shirty, so we ejected them. So, but Nine Maidens is good. That's another good. So that was one of the ones that people were trying to get, because it's up on a mountain, it's up on the top of a hill, somewhere in Buxton, near Buxton in Derbyshire. That was we had a festival there. We started one. And that's what we did with the dogs to a large extent. On maybe a dozen occasions, we were the people who started the festival. We put it around that we'd be playing at the sound show, and people turned up. People just turned up out of the blue.
So sometimes here's my question though: when you just show up in a field, where do you get the electricity for the
generators?
You brought generators with you.
Oh, good, yeah. I mean, we're talking when we played Aldermaston. there was a flatbed truck with a battery on it that could have done. They did all the lights as well.
Yeah.
At Aldermaston, because we used to, because a lot of the festivals would be at places that had a bit of dark energy around them, because nobody wanted to go anymore, and nobody really objected to us having a festival there. So we tried to. So there was a degree of like, well, if we go there, we can kind of exercise the bad energy from the place. I mean, I had eczema in my left hand for 10 years after Aldermaston, because that's nuclear. It's near a nuclear facility. It's where the nuclear research facility in Britain is. And we had a festival literally virtually almost next door to the facility in an old abandoned sort of area. And it is weird. Like I say, I had eczema on my left hand for 10 years after that. Eventually faded, but I'd never had it before and I'd never had it since. But I used to get little blisters on my. I always wondered if I'd put my hand in something over that weekend.
Right. Well, that's kind of ironic too, because wasn't one of the goals of the peace convoy was like anti-nuclear or nuclear disarmament?
Oh yeah, they supported the girls at Greenham Common, the Greenham Common ladies. The festival people helped them out, taught them loads. They showed them how to, basically exist on virtually nothing. Well, I mean, no, yeah, they're all part of it. Yeah, it's all part of that. Yeah, I mean, the anti-nuclear thing, I mean, that was just, I think that was as much to do with that it was so badly done. It was so shabbily looked after. It wasn't necessarily that nuclear was a bad thing totally per se. It's just the way it was done was sort of half-assed a lot of the time. I mean, there was a couple of incidents, and people don't realise this. There were a couple of incidents in Britain that nearly turned Chernobyl. We're talking about there were at least a couple of incidents that were verging on Chernobyl disaster level disasters in Britain. There's one in Windscale, and there was one, I can't remember the name of it. It's somewhere near Bristol, Hinkley Point, I think it's called. There was one there as well. And they were hushed up for donkey's years, and then 20, 30 years after it happened, because they were built in the 50s, came out. Oh, yeah. It was a bit, because you remember what I said about the Solworth Firth photograph? If you look at the Solworth Spaceman photograph, if you look in the back, if you get a good copy of it, if you look in the background and look right at the back, you can see the nuclear power station is behind the figure.
Yeah.
And I've postulated, because he was a fireman, the guy who took the photos, I've always wondered if he knew somebody who'd had an accident in the new power station, and that was his projection onto the film. Because to me, it kind of looks like a 1950s, 1960s asbestos fireproof suit.
Yeah,
I've always looked a bit like that. If you look it up, you'll just see what I mean. Well,
I don't think it would have been the Cockney Spaceman. So,
and that's kind
of. I like the idea of that being a psychic projection onto the film. And that makes sense if he's he's a fireman or he knew somebody that was at the nuclear plant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I mean that kind of goes, like I say, in a weird way, that's the festivals.
Right.
We were trying to ask the right questions. That was really what it was all about, was people asking the right questions of the society we live in. Because we looked at it and saw it drifting in such a way that it was becoming completely bloody impersonal. That people were becoming sort of, and it's not about this sort of. It's about a world community, really. That's what it's about. The whole point was, Burning Man's become very commercial, hasn't it? I mean, it's basically died on its own. It's basically eaten itself, hasn't it? But Burning Man was inspired by us. Right. You know what I mean? The three festivals in Britain were the original inspiration for Burning Man. They saw what went on over here and they tried to do it in America. And from what I hear, for the first 5 or 6 years, it was exactly the same as the British festival.
Yeah.
And then it's basically corporate, isn't it? I mean, Glastonbury is, I mean, Glastonbury's just bloody BBC corporate bullshit now. I mean, it's fucking Beyonce.
Oh, really?
Well, it's not even bloody ironic. It's not even bloody. It's not even funny ironic. I mean, they were saying
Yeah.
there was some one day today. He's a bit of a wanker called Richard Berg, and he's a writer. Richard Osman. He's a writer who used to be a TV presenter. Probably the most amazing lineup was Coldplay, U2, and Beyonce. It was literally about 300 people in the replies going, no, that's probably the bloody worst lineup you could possibly have. Bloody corporate could you get? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because that goes back to 71, I think, was the first Glastonbury. Michael Eavis, when he was a decent bloke before he turned into a wanger. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Slip that one in there. So, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I wish people outside of the UK could just come and sit and be in one of those places that we used to have the festivals. And I think that within half an hour, you go, oh yeah, I get this.
Well, I mean, I think what we need to do is a time travel tour guide. And, you can just pick people up and bring them back to one of those festivals. And
oh yeah, well, I wonder how many time travelers I met at those festivals. I mean, genuinely, there's a couple of times when you spoke to people who seemed to come from somewhere completely, you know what I mean? But because of the state you're in, you just thought, oh yeah, well, you know, part of the course, isn't it? A festival. But in a straight, if you took it out of the festival and say that happened in a house, you really would be going, what the fuck? Who was that person? Who the bloody hell was that?
Right.
How the fuck do they know that? You know, sort of thing.
Well, I had wondered if in that story you told earlier about driving through the army the army area, like, you know, I wonder if that was like a time slip sort of thing. You know?
I wonder. Well, I mean, it's funny because Tim, the bass player for the Dogs, last time we spoke, he said, by the way, do you remember that thing happening with the army bases? Did that really happen? I went, yeah. He was like, man, fucking hell. He said, how the hell did we end up in an army base without getting stopped? Because we forget, this is like, it was 1985. We were basically at war with the IRA. So you didn't get, army bases were totally off, you know what I mean? Wandering around army bases in a van. So it certainly wasn't because, you know, we could have had bombs and shit. Well, you know, it's serious fucking security. It's not like the USA or somewhere where you didn't have that. So it's contending with. I mean, army bases were completely off out of bounds. They're just wandering around with no particular reason to be there. So, but I still don't know how we managed to get there up a Cradle Hill. Because I spoke to a couple of.
That's what I'm saying. That's probably because it wasn't there in the 80s, but it was, you know, 40 years before, and you just drove through an older encampment, you know.
Yeah, very strange. We're back at festivals. We don't want people to talk about genuine things.
Yeah,
that's what it's all about. You know, it's corporate. Because you know, let's not mince words. Corporatism and fascism are two of the bloody same cheeks of the same arse. They now think that they can just do what the fuck they like.
Well, it's about commodification and but also just stopping people from enjoying themselves and having the room to consider these things. You know?
And that is and that's what Penny Rambo and Wally would have told you. It was all about people having time to consider such shit. How much, you say, oh, it's hippie, you never get anything done. No, that was the falsehood. That was the lie they had to sell to people, that nobody got anything done. But they did. There was a whole alternative culture growing up around it, so they had to be nipped in the bud. It's really funny because it still exists. There is I mean, I don't know if I've spoken about this before. What was the hippie trail in the 1960s? You left London, you flew to Amsterdam, you went from Amsterdam to Greece, then you went to the Lebanon, then from the Lebanon you went to Afghanistan, From Afghanistan, you went to Eastern Timor, and then you flew to California and then back to London. That was the thing. Well, what happened to Lebanon? What happened to Afghanistan? What happened to Eastern Timor? How strange. It's almost like, it's it's like, this is because they were making a lot of money. Afghanistan loved it because they were making a shed load of money. Because a hippie with 10 quid in his pocket is far better off than back in the day. If it was just 10 quid in his pocket, it was a bloody fortune to somebody in Afghanistan in 1968. So, and the same with Lebanon, and the same with Eastern Timor. So it's like all of a sudden, they've got religious wars, and it completely destroys, because Lebanon used to be the gambling capital of the Middle East. Lebanon was, Lebanon, if you look at movies from the 50s, Lebanon, it's all fucking casinos on the beach and everything. Well, it was like the leisure capital of the Middle East. But we can't have that. It's almost like, sorry, mate, we're going to put a stop to this, you know what I mean? Because it was like the whole thing about we can't have everybody around the world sort of realising that they can get on together. It sounds horribly hippie, doesn't it? But, that's what Kerry Thornley and everybody was about, wasn't it? It was Merry Pranksters and all that shit. They might have started with MK Ultra, but it was its own tale, wasn't it, when it came down to it? You know what I mean? What started out as a method of control, as often happens, just backfires big time and turned into the counterculture, almost accidentally. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I honestly can't think of anything really bad that ever happened to me at festival. That's the weird thing. Considering how much time I've spent with them, I honestly can't remember having particularly bad experience. And we had one guy who reverted back to an ape. That was weird. There was a guy who'd never been to a festival before, took acid, and he reverted back to apehood. I mean, he literally took all his clothes off and just sitting in a fucking tree. Literally acting like an ape, doing all the physical stuff. And in the middle of it, the police arrived and said, "Oh, we've got to move on from here." So hang on a minute. So I remember the first bus pulling out, because we said, okay, we were going somewhere else anyway, so there was no skin off our nose. I said, yeah, okay. I remember the first bus pulling out with this bloke wrapped in a quilt, sort of thing, sitting on the front of the fucking bus with his legs crossed, still doing the chimp thing. That's sort of like the pensive thing that the chimps do.
Yeah.
Still reverted back to an ape. It's perfectly fine a couple of hours later. And he kind of, no, I didn't, did I? Was I? Really? Yeah, he was scarred naked sitting up a tree looking like an ape, mate. He's like, no. You're joking, No, mate, we had to go and find your clothes.
Well, maybe he really wanted a banana.
Yeah, probably. but I remember that I can't honestly, the only bad memory I remember of the festival is that the one in Haybluff in the winter of 80, because I was working, so I wasn't up there. The winter in Haybluff, there was a really nasty flu virus went. And I reckon a couple of my mates were close to nearly fucking copied it, because they were stuck in a bender on top of a bloody hill, mate, on top of a hill, the roaring, freezing cold. I mean, benders are really warm. You don't even really need a fire in one, just to heat off your body, because it's round, just reflects back. It's amazing how warm they are. And poor sods, I mean, literally, they were ill. Everybody got it, sort of thing. So there was a period when nobody could do anything, because everybody was just down with flu. So I had a genuine flu. I could, funny enough, posted about this yesterday. Somebody was going on about, this is what I'm worried about, and this is what worries me about flu. And I went, you've never had fucking flu. I've had flu once in my life, mate, and it feels like you've been beaten up and rolled down in a hill in a barrel. You cannot move.
Yeah, I've had it before.
Yeah, I've had it once in my life, and I literally lay on the sofa for 5 days and I couldn't fucking move. You know what I mean? Everything.
Yeah.
So
when I had it, I probably should have gone to the hospital, but I think my fever had gotten so high that I was probably in the danger zone.
Oh,
But
really?
yeah, I had I was living in an apartment at the time. My upstairs neighbor was a biker, Hell's Angel kind of guy, and he would get up bright and early in the morning and start drinking beer outside in the driveway. He had a big cooler with ice in it. And I stumbled outside, and he's like, "Oh, you look like shit." And I was just like so hot, I felt hot. And I asked him for some ice. He gave me like a big chunk of ice that was like the size of a brick. And I brought it inside. I went in the shower. I put the shower on cold, and I was using the brick like it was a bar of soap, like this brick of ice.
Wow.
And
Shit,
I could see
that's
steam coming off of me. And it was like I probably, if I didn't do that, I probably would never would, my temp would have got too high. I could have really been.
well,
But
that's
yeah,
what,
that was like a
it's one of
full
those.
week of just not being able to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, what most blokes think of as flu is actually a heavy cold, which
Yeah,
it's not nice. But
yeah,
look, flu, like I say, I remember just waking up and I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I was like about 10 minutes later, I managed to get downstairs. I just lay on, I literally, I just remember lying on the sofa for literally 5 days and I
yeah.
couldn't move. And if you moved your arm, it's like, oh, Jesus, yeah, Christ, man. So, do you see this?
Down a little bit. Oh, yep, I see it. It's actually called nourishment.
Yeah, this is what festivals, this is what you live on at festivals.
Ah,
This is what people used to live on at festivals. And ravers, ask any raver about nourishment. I don't know if you can get it in the States, but
no.
it's amazing stuff because people think, oh, right, oh, it's good. But you try eating after, if you try eating a meal after you've had one of these, you can't. And this
It's
has
just like
90%.
food replacement.
Yeah, it's like 90% of it. It's literally advertised. It's 90% of everything you need.
Yeah, I mean, we have things like that, but they probably have a ton of artificial stuff in them and
This
toxic
is just
crap that's
strawberry.
not
This
allowed
just
in your
tastes like
country. What?
this just tastes like strawberry milk. But
Yeah.
this is the lifeblood of a festival. You took a few cans of because you could take a few cans of this and like if you suddenly thought, oh shit, I forgot to eat for because I've been doing shit, forgot to eat for the last 24 hours, can of this and you're fine.
Hmm.
And the other thing, there's a thing called Jordan's Crunch, which basically owes its sort of marketplace to festivals. It was a sort of because he's totally vegetarian, what have you? He actually it's vegan, what have you? But it was
It's sort of
pretty.
like granola.
Yes, it's like a granola thing, but it comes with
Yeah,
fruit,
yeah.
and it was a very niche thing until the festivals, and then suddenly they discovered them selling bags of because it used to come in bags, not even in boxes. So like,
Yeah.
but literally, you'd have a Chinese takeaway tray
Hmm.
with granola and pour this over it. That was that was breakfast. Because
Yeah.
there were people at festivals. The veggie burgers used to get at festivals. Fucking awesome. There's a couple of people I know that was how they made their living at festivals. They did, that was cooking. So they're vegan. They're vegan. Their veggie burgers are just bloody awesome. So
Yeah.
yeah, oh god, yeah,
So I
yeah.
mean, all of those sound better than trying to bring fish to the festival.
Yeah, well, I was saying to my mate earlier, I said there was one guy. He had an old Royal Navy Bedford truck, which was converted into a sort of cafe.
Yeah.
And I know we noticed what do you call it, after a few hours. I said to him one day, got up one morning, went out, said, cup of tea, please. Yeah, I said, hey, I said, I noticed you all seem to park next door to us at festivals. He went, yeah, good neighbours. I never thought of that. Well, actually, that we went to so many festivals, we had a bloke who thought of himself as our neighbour.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, his tea was fucking magic. It was like, that was, we joke about British and the tea that you can solve everything.
Yeah.
Literally, his tea was just fucking, if you felt utterly shit, if you felt really fucked up, what do you call it? One of his teas just had this remarkable restorative effect on you. So,
Hmm.
because festivals worked, you know, you didn't burn the candle from both ends, you started in the middle and worked outwards.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember the story about 84 Stonehenge. Two friends of mine. He said, I said, I've got Stonehenge. He said, yeah, we got Bender together. He said, and I'm like, he said, I swear I heard Hawkwind playing. And he said, we must have walked about 3 or 4 miles around the festival site looking for Hawkwind. And they were playing. They played for about 4 hours the night of the solstice. And the mate said, so we walked around the bloody whole site. We could hear Hawkwind. We couldn't fucking find out where we were playing. So we get back to our fucking Bender and we realised basically we pushed the Bender behind the fucking stage. So then she got all the way around and back, and they were literally 20 yards behind where the stage was. So I think that's why they could hear the band. But that's classic festival. That's absolutely classic festival behaviour. So
he just kept going. He probably would have wandered onto the stage.
Yeah. Oh, right, here we are. But yeah, because they'd have with the bands how it used to work, they'd have a blackboard up by the side of the stage, and you just go up and write your band's name down and just take it in and say, oh, you're up next, you know. So there you go. So, Smart Pills, 2000 DS. Oh God, the Roonies. There's some interesting bands, but they got it. It got a bit like they're either punk or reggae punk, which was like, stop it, you know what I mean?
Right.
It got a bit boring. So we were like the jukebox. We kind of played, because we started off just doing cover versions. We just did the greatest hits, the sort of. So we played T-Rex, we played Steve Village, we played Frank Zappa, played Hawkwind, we played any number of different bands, and that's kind of how we knew our own material when we started writing. It was decent, because if it didn't sound crap compared to a Zappa song, yeah, it must be quite a decent song, you know. So we had a sort of, that's how kind of we started. But yeah, I mean, I remember that first festival we played, the Oxford Port Meadow one, I was so out of my tits. We were singing, I think it's Motorway City. Motorway City's got like it's got an echo. It's Motorway City, Motorway City, Motorway City, something. There's a repeat echo on some of the lines. And I'm standing on stage, I'm just ride on through the night. And I can hear the ride on through the night because the guys put an echo on at the PA, but I can fucking see it. I'm not out of it. I'm going, ride on through the night. And I see this white sort of thing bouncing across the I'm singing. So I ended up starting singing shit and watching it. So I must have looked really bloody weird, you know, because I'm like, woohoo! I only completely fucked it up once, and that was on mushrooms. And I got through the whole set, got to the encore, and we used to do Pretty Vacant as an encore. And we used to do it about 10 times faster than the Pistols. Right. And I'd done this whole gig, and I sort of got to sort of congratulate myself a bit here. Fucking hell, we've done a whole gig on mushrooms and you haven't fucked anything up. That's really good going. So we go back on and do the encore, but it's kind of broken my concentration. So it starts up, and I'm hanging off the mic stand, vocalist, and I'm hanging off the mic stand. I'm thinking, fucking hell, we rock. This band's really, really good. And then suddenly I'm kind of aware that the whole band's looking at me. So I turned around and all the band's looking at me, and I fucking realised we're about halfway through this third verse and I haven't said anything. I was just standing there. I was just standing there listening to it. This sounds really good. I was oh shit. So started singing. So they acted like, oh yeah, well that was deliberate.
Yeah.
But that's the only time I ever did a gig tripping. That's the only time I ever did a gig trip. That was at Hot Pickers Ball, 1986. It was a good night. Yeah, I mean, again, that was the Name family for Shepherd Name Beard who let us play on their land. That was the Name family. Apparently, the people, the names now are a bunch of proper arseholes. but back then they were quite cool.
Hmm.
Apparently, the guy's take his son. I guess it's his son. He's a bit of an arsehole. I've heard some really nasty things about it, but Andrew Neame was a really nice bloke. He had a really nice little festival on his land. It was just like I say, you can't help look back with the. I'm sure there were people who had horrible fucking experiences at the festival, but I don't know many. You know what I mean? And then the people, everybody I know had hassle at festivals. Said somebody came up and sorted it out. You know, to sat and so I mean, a couple of mates of mine who had sort of got lost in an acid trip. And said, it was amazing. You know, I was like wandering around. Somebody fucking literally just said, "What's up, mate? What's going on?" I'm like, sit down, man. Have a cup of tea. Have a fucking joint, man. That'll take the edge off it. So just people just being nice. Fucking, that's kind of what it was really about. People being bloody nice to each other. But we can't.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah. Kind of weird. I say, looking back, you know, all that hassle because people were being nice to each other.
Right.
Weird. So most coppers, most of the local police were fine.
Right.
They didn't like having these sort of military operations on their land. In fact, the guy who retired as the chief constable of Wiltshire the year before the Beanfield, he said he would never have allowed it to happen. He said it wouldn't have happened under my watch. He said, I'm not having the police are not military fucking thugs. So he said, I'm disgusted by what won't happen. And a lot of police officers, it's really funny. The festivals were to a degree, depending on the chief constable. But if the chief constable was a wanker, you probably couldn't get away with the festival. But if the chief constable was cool, they were fine. And there's some chief constables. I remember when we played in Penzance, we played the fucking. It was mad. Basically, it was a festival on a recreation ground in the middle of a fucking town.
Mm-hmm.
It was really weird. I mean, we all thought it was on the edge of town, and he wasn't. We were surrounded by bloody houses.
Yeah.
And on the Sunday night, the Monday night when we left, as we got to the gate, the chief constable stopped our van, knocked on the windows, can I have a word? Yeah, on the window there. I said, what's up, officer? And I went, I'd just like to thank you for taking notes of the curfew. Because they basically said, can you sort of kill it after 11? And we were like, yeah, sure. So, and so by 11, everything was quiet. But he said, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you, lads, for for taking notice of the curfew. So spot on, 11 o'clock, it's all quiet, everybody's, that's it sort of thing. And it was a weekend. So, yeah, so it wasn't all bad, you know, like I say. I think people did. I think a lot of people did realise the vast majority of people at festivals are really decent people.
Yeah,
just different, you know, a bit weird, you know. Fucking looked a bit weird. Like I say, when you look at some of the fashions, there's like 6-7 years before grunge. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? Nirvana just looked like a festival people, just looked like a people from a festival. And I remember because we dressed like that, it was really weird. All of a sudden, 1990, people from record companies are like, oh, they look really cool, don't they? 2 years previously, couldn't get bloody arrested. Look, well, fucking hell, what do they look like? So, you know, and then suddenly, bang, it's like, oh, right, yeah, you look cool now.
Yeah.
Life in it. They'll sell, the corporates will sell you it back somehow, right? Like I say, they've done it with Glastonbury.
Right.
And grunge.
Well, and then the Tubular Dog album came out in what, 96? So it was right around that grunge era.
Yeah.
On the tail end of that.
I mean, that was kind of weird. Because we never really the band split up, the original lineup split up because suddenly we became that successful. That's why we split up. With one member of the band, but one of the guys in the band, it just became. It was like, oh, this is dead serious. We kind of reached it. It was really weird. I remember we played a couple of gigs after we did. I remember when we came off the tour with the first tour we did with Hawkwind, it's like 30 odd dates, 35 dates. We did a gig in Oxford. Fucking dreadful. It's like we'd never met each other. And I remember thinking it was like we'd lost the nervous energy of playing with Hawkwind, whereby, you know, if you don't get it right, we're going to get fucking booed up, basically. So, you know what I mean? We're still the only band who've ever supported Hawkwind to get an encore. And we dreadful, what do you call it? And then we hit a new plateau. And we got to the point where I knew we were playing gigs and we were just on a complete, we could play with anybody. And nobody really wanted to go on after us. Not because we were brilliant, but because of the energy. We just become the stagecraft, we'd got it nailed. You know what I mean? We'd grown into it. What have you. And then record companies really we were getting serious from very big record companies. And one of the guys, that wasn't what he wanted to do. All of a sudden, he could see, he could sense that we had like 40, 50 people who come to every gig, following us around the country. You know, when you get to that sort of thing, that's when you know that you've got something. So you know that you start to think, it's like, you know, when there's 40, 50 people who turn up at every fucking gig, there's normally another 150 people who turn up as well because they've heard about it, word of mouth, whatever sort of thing. So one of the guys, he just thought, this is because it's like a job, you know what I mean?
Right.
And he didn't want that level of success. That level of success he wasn't comfortable with. And we carried on playing live. You know, when he left, we had a couple more live. We had several very successful. But it was never quite the same because he and I had a special. He was the rhythm guitar player, and I used to sort of like any song I wrote, I'd give it to him, and we'd jam it with the band. And if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. And he was like my litmus paper for any of the songs. Right. If he wanted to have a go at playing it in the rehearsal, I thought, well, can't be that bad. And then if everybody else went with it, you'd think, okay, this one works. So I kind of lost my touchstone in that sense. And he was a natural rhythm player. There ain't many around. You know what I mean? Yeah. Most people want to be a lead guitar player, whereas he was just happy to be a rhythm player. He ended up playing bass, and when he left, he went and played bass in another band, sort of thing. But it was just two mates playing in that. That's what I mean. It lost the matey thing. Because we were all mates just playing together, you know. Yeah. And then it sort of gradually got more and more professional. And all of a sudden we're famous, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, right, okay. Like I say, the whole fucking crazy thing with before the net, how it fills a vacuum, you know what I mean? If people don't know. So we're doing an interview after a gig in London. And at the end of the interview, the journalist says, wow, it's amazing that you speak English so well. What? What? Well, it's if we've even got you got regional accents. Hey, what do you mean? He says, well, you're German, aren't you? We went, hey, what? He said, aren't you? And the story was, because we came out of nowhere, and we didn't have people in the music business. All of a sudden, we're playing big venues and shit. And we're playing on the bill, you know, not only with Hawkwind, but with The Damned and Suicide and all these fucking other indie bands. And then we're on the bill with them. So the music business had come up with two stories. We were German, and we were all the offspring of Can and Noi and German krautrock bands. And the other story, and this is a fucking mad one, because you know Dog Tube the Dog. Do you know there was a fucking offshoot of the Grateful Dead called Kingfish?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, okay. So in '88, when we played the Hammersmith Odeon, which is like, you know, Madison Square Garden in the UK, the Dead were on tour in Europe, and they took time off touring to come and see Hawkwind playing at Hammersmith. And we were the guests with them. So the Grateful Dead had turned up to see Hawkwind, this mysterious band who, like, on the first night, it holds about 5,200 people. On the first night, it was about a third of the seats were empty when we walked on. On the second night, you could count the empty seats. So the story then was, because the Grateful Dead were there, and of course they were called Kingfish, and we were Tube the Dog, God Halibut, that we were fucking related to the fucking Grateful Dead. And that's all down to because they didn't know who we were, because we weren't so-and-so's kids. And we'd made our own way in the business. We hadn't had any help in it as such, sort of thing. I mean, that's kind of that's pre the internet. People just where people don't know, they just make shit up. Well, they can't possibly be this famous without being somebody else famous's kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? But what, really? So I mean, that's just how fucking weird it was. I remember one dude, a journalist, who played, I think it's a Town and Country. We were on a bill with, I think that was with the Damned. And we were second on the bill. And there was a journo. And we were all sitting outside. Well, nervous energy, you can imagine, you know. And we had a fucking smoker. I think we must have been about an eighth of an ounce in this fucking pipe, smoked it. And this it's like, I worked out, you bastards. I could hardly fucking stand up. You're going on stage. And of course, because of the height, you know, the nervous energy, it's sort of all it did with us was calm us down a bit, you know. So we're like, oh, yeah, of course, they needed that. So we all walked on stage, and this journalist basically said, I was fucking flying. After the gig, he goes, fucking hell, man, I was absolutely flying watching you lot tonight. I was like, really? He said, yeah. I said, how the fucking hell do you play like that? And we were like, well, we don't. That's the point. Because of the nervous part, all that dope does is kill a bit of the bloody nerves for us. So I think, you know, because it's like anything, isn't it? It's like you've got people who are brilliant. Life's a series of tests in any field. In music, it's like it's the same as writing. You wrote when you were 15. You wrote when you were 20 years old. You started writing poems. You put out your little books. You sell your own books of poetry at the gigs you did, and then you come online. You say, you know what I mean. You move up. You gradually move up. I think you mentioned maybe somebody from a fucking, you know, you were writing for a place that shut down, didn't you?
For what?
You were writing for a website that closed. You just started. Yeah, exactly. Sort of thing. And it's the same in music. You've got kids who can play in the bedroom. You put them in a pub and they fall apart.
Right.
You got people who are brilliant in a pub band. You put them on a medium-sized stage. Can't project. It just doesn't work.
Right.
You got people who can play medium-sized venues. You put them in a big venue and they freeze. They can't fill the stage. And I remember the night before we played, the first night we played at Hammersmith Odeon, because like I say, that's like getting to Madison Square Garden. You know, the old joke, how'd you get to Madison Square Garden? You practice a lot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
So me and Andy, the drummer, were standing in the same, so we just seen Lemmy. I was like, we're coming down the stage because it's like a really tight thing at the back of the Hammersmith Odeon. It's really quite small. So we're coming down this sort of spiral, almost like a spiral staircase, and Lemmy's banging this lass up against the wall, sort of thing, and like he stops mid thrust. Right, let's have a fucking good gig. Right, let me just sort of carry on stage as you do. So we're standing waiting to go on, and Andy looks at me and goes, "Are you fucking nervous?" I went, "I'm shitting it. I'm absolutely shitting myself." And I'm like, I'm looking at, I'm kind of looking out from the side. It's the first night. I'm thinking, this is fucking Hammersmith Odeon. What the fuck am I doing here?
Yeah.
You're on. 2 steps out on the stage, bang. This is what I'm here for. Really weird. I went from like, what the fuck am I here doing here to this is what I do. This is what I told you the story, didn't I, about the Thin Lizzy gig, 1976, when I first moved to London.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was sitting in the circle, and I'm watching Phil Lynott, and all of a sudden, it's me. We saw it because I had waist length hair at the time. I've got hair down to about there, and I'm singing on stage at Hammersmith Odeon. And I'm looking there, and I'm thinking, what the fuck? Huh? I'm not even, at this time, I wasn't in the band. No intention of being in the band. I wanted to be a promoter. And yet, for 30 seconds that night, I'm looking at me standing on stage with slightly, let's say, with hair to about here instead of down here, singing into a mic. I'm thinking, what the fuck? And then just as quickly, just bang, and I'm back and it's Phil Lynott. And I always remember thinking, what the fuck was that about? Because I had no intention, didn't even play in a band. So like fucking 12 years later, it was exactly me. And I remember thinking, looking in the mirror before we went outside, looking around, I thought, fuck, I looked like I did that night. I had like a time slip, whatever, I don't know.
Oh, it's like a vision of the future.
Yeah. And I say at the time, I just thought, oh, it's completely bloody insane. Singing? What the fuck? No. Yeah. Having a joke because I played bass for a start. So I think, what the fuck? No way, what the bloody hell? And I remember just snapping out. It was in the middle of Still in Love with You. The song Still in Love with You by Thin Lizzy. Because it's a brilliant gig. I mean, it's one of the ones they recorded on Live and Dangerous. So kind of weird. But it's the same with your writing. I have no doubt that you'd have no problem writing a book and getting it published, and you'd think, God, don't you? But a lot of people, they'd write the book, but they'd never let anybody else see it.
Yeah.
It's levels of everything with that sort of thing, and it's the same. There's a lot of very bang average musicians who have great careers because they can do it, because they can carry on. Every stage, they can make it. There was a guy called Dave Clark at my school. He was a brilliant guitar player, and he played in a band. He did 3 gigs. The first gig, he walked on stage, freaked out, turned around, played the whole gig with his back to the audience. The second gig, all you could see was his lead going across the side of the stage, and he was hidden behind the PA. So the third gig, he didn't turn up. Couldn't do it. Brilliant guitar player.
Right.
But put him in public, bang, fall apart. And it's the same with speaking in public. You can do it, I can do it. A lot of people can't. A lot of people can't. I've won prizes for public speaking back in the day at school. I had a fucking mantelpiece full of fucking prizes for public speaking. Where they asked us not to enter because we kept winning shit. So the school asked us not to enter, so we entered as our own group, the Attleborough discussion group, and won it anyway. And that was the Berwick Mountain incident. I'm sure we just finished a competition, a debating competition at the council house, and we were walking back when the Berwick Mountain incident, when we saw the thing go over the sky in front of us. And I remember turning around and 3 of us went, fuck me, they've done it. They've hit the button because it was that white. It was that little.
Right.
Sort of thing. And then as it sort of faded away, we could see this sort of, and it moved like that across the sky. It was really quite slow. Sort of thing. And that was the Berwyn Mountain. Whatever landed hit in Berwyn Mountain, that was it. Sort of.
Yeah.
But that was, like I say, but that's life, isn't it? And there'll always be people who sort of like decry other people for having that ability because they think they're better. But if you can't do it in public, tough. You know what I mean?
Right.
If you want a career in anything like that, you've got to have the sort of brass neck, crass stupidity, whatever it is, that allows you to go out there and do it in front of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I never looked at a video of me until I was 50 years old. And I eventually somebody said to me, have you seen that video of you back in 1980 with Trespass? No. I don't want to. I said, because I probably look a complete twat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I probably look like the biggest twat in the universe. But
Well,
eventually I
that's the
thought,
thing, and then you become self-conscious the next time you step on stage because you don't want to do
exactly.
that thing
But I thought I'm 50 now. I ain't throwing shapes on stage and all that bollocks. If I sing, I'll sing, you know. So
again.
okay, have a look. And I was fucking amazed. I was like, shit, I really did it. I had that, I could see what people meant. I
Right.
just had that sort of fuck you arrogance. Because I had a friend who never really into the music I play, used to come and see me live. And one night I said to us, we're having a smoke. I said, "What the fuck do you ever come to see me?" Like, I said, "I don't play. You don't. So not really the sort of music you're into at all. None of my bands have ever really been what you're into." And he just looked at me. Right, he's a really good classical guitar player. He teaches. What's he got? He just looks at me and says, "You've got one of the best fuck off smiles I've ever seen." He said, "You just don't give a shit." He said, "You can tell when you look at you, don't give a shit." I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, because I'm never aware, I've never seen myself. He said, yeah, you just look like basically, fuck off. I'm doing this. Fuck you. I said, yeah. He said, yeah. He says, I love watching it. He said, because so few people in the band really have got that. And most people are so fucking self-conscious. What do you call it? Because he knew shit about music. He'll say he teaches. He was a brilliant classical guitar player. He was a busker. He travelled all over. I mean, he travelled all over fucking Europe. Told you. We went to see Frank Zappa together, 1978, tickets and beer tour. Next day, we went down the Portobello Road. We got separated somewhere down the Portobello Road. The next time I saw him was 7 years later at the General Wolf in Coventry. That's me the festival person. I said, what the fuck happened to you that night? When we got separated down the Portobello, I said, oh, I ended up in Switzerland. I said, what happened to you? I said, oh, I don't know. I ended up in a fucking party on a boat in Bristol that night. And like, we didn't bump into each other again because fucking 78, we bumped into each other again in a pub in Coventry in 1985.
Wow.
And he'd literally been all over the bloody world back by then. So and he decided to come back and go to college to do music.
Well, to do music. You could do a lot in 7 years. So.
Oh, he had some white. Well, I mean, literally, he lived with the family up in the Rift Mountains.
Mm.
Yeah. Fucking hell, yeah. He lived with the family up in the Rift Mountains for a year, growing, literally going dope and what have you, sort of thing, madness. So Dave Hutchinson, Dave, everybody knows. You don't like it because he's tiny, to be honest, but everybody knows him as Little Dave. His name's Dave Hutchinson, really nice bloke. But fucking hell, that was so funny bumping into a pub. I remember my girlfriend at the time said, "Who's that?" I said, "Oh, the last time I saw him was down Portobello Road 7 years ago." So we went to see Frank Zappa together. The next day we went out of the lash, and that was it. We just went separate ways for 7 years. There you go. So, but that kind of sums it up. And the other thing that people forget about festivals, there was 4 cities in Britain in the 1980s: Bristol, Nottingham, Sheffield, Coventry. And they were the hippie cities. That is a lot of people from the festivals, that's where they spend the winter. Or if they wanted to go and stay with somebody, they go to Nottingham. And they were the 4 cities where you go to a pub and people smoke dope in the pub, people smoke joints in the pubs, sort of thing. And you go somewhere else, you just get up, and all the locals go, "What the fuck are you doing?" Yeah. I'll just get the joint together. What, in the pub? Sort of thing. Yeah, why? And it was so different. I mean, Coventry was notorious for it. But those 4 cities, and if you look at the music scene, it's really interesting. A lot of bands came out. You had the trip hop scene come out of Massive Attack, Portishead. They came out of the Bristol scene. Sheffield, you had Pulp, and 2 or 3 other bands that came from Sheffield. Coventry had the Dogs. And there's a couple of other bands came out of Coventry sort of thing at that period. So they were the sort of places that sort of held on to the indie sort of ethic, even more than Liverpool and Manchester. They were a bit more sort of corporate. I don't know, because that whole fucking scene, the Hacienda was really nasty, really. I mean, look, it was great if you just laid up out your face and you just, but it was fucking serious criminals involved with the Hacienda and all that scene. And it wasn't, our scene wasn't. We did, criminals didn't work. You know what I mean? I'm sure there were a few dodgy people. There was, funny enough, one of the people I knew came from a genuine gangster family in London. Well, there was a lass I knew, really, really nice lass, very, very sound lass. But her family were proper fucking London criminals. Like, sort of person that the cock is basement.
Yeah.
Don't fucking always me, you can't. Well, they're very much that way. So, but yeah, she told us a few interesting stories. Because the family told her about times in London in the 60s and whatever. Because London in the 60s, that must have been weird. That must have been fucking, that must have been a right fucking laugh. Bag of Nails and all those places. But again, there are a lot of criminals involved with it. I was spoken because Sharon Osbourne sued her own father, Sharon Osbourne's dad is Don Arden.
Right.
Jet Records. And he was a really nasty bastard.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. That's where she gets it from. But I mean, fucking hell, man. I would love. It's funny because people like you and Pud and all the people I know from the States and what have you, I would love you to have been there.
Yeah.
I would love
Sounds
you
like
to show.
Oh
yeah, fuck it. And like I say, a lot of the stuff that we talk about weird shit, it kind of happened. You know what I mean? There was genuinely weird shit used to sort of thing, and people and there were people wouldn't hide from it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh wow, fucking hell, man. What do you reckon? Fucking tripping or whatever, sort of thing. But so from that point of view, were we trying to raise it? Yeah, I guess we were. I think there was the Elysian part of it. God, we never really talked about that, did we? The Elysian part of it in the main part of what was the festival bit. But there was a definite undercurrent. I didn't know Kerry Thornley or any of those people. It didn't really come up. But like I say, I was trying. So I think, I've been trying to work out how my lineage came. How did the people I was influenced by, where did they get it from? I think this Dwarves group must be it. I think that's probably where they got it from. And I think if we were to look, I suspect there's some cross-pollination between the Dwarves and the Kerry Thornley crew.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them were yourself included and influenced by like Robert Anton Wilson too. Right?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, Wilson was very much that guru. I mean, I went to see him at Warwick Uni in 1984. And it was literally fucking full of people from the festival. So, I mean, he really enjoyed it. I could tell he really enjoyed that night because he knew he had a class, he had literally a fucking room full of people who were all fucking weird as him, sort of thing.
Right.
Because I can imagine a lot.
That's kind of where the StarDoG name comes from, isn't it? Like the serious connection.
Serious StarDoG. Serious StarDoG. Yeah, that's right. Serious Dog Style was what our company was called. Yeah, we did. I mean, we ran a business for 5-6 years. We actually ran a business. It was called Serious Dog Style. That was the other thing that remember showing you the pictures of Anarchy Bridge and everything. Because that goes back. Those photographs are from '83. with I've Seen the Funhoids and all that's in Coventry. I mean, so it was sort of, it was definitely part of it all. And like, certain festivals, I don't know if Wilson ever went to one. Maybe he did, I don't know. It's quite possible.
Yeah.
When he toured here, they were still very much allowed. There were still quite a few. So I wonder if he ever bothered going along to, because there were some. They used to have these weird little do's in old railway cuttings and what have you in London. I mean, I went to the strongest. That's where I bought the strongest dope I ever. The one that completely blew me away. That's where I bought that. It was at one of those dudes there, and that was 77. He was, because Leary was banned from the UK. They wouldn't let Leary into the country.
Right.
Wilson got in, but Leary was person non grata. He was basically considered person non grata. He wasn't. They wouldn't allow him in. They wouldn't give him a visa. Leary tried to do a couple of lecture tours over and fuck off. You're not coming in trouble, because he was the poster boy for it all, wasn't he?
Right.
He was a troublemaker and all that sort of shit. Whereas Rob kind of went under the radar, didn't he? Because I had really 78 Cosmic Trigger.
No, it was earlier than that, I think. Oh no, maybe that's right.
Was it 78 the Cosmic Trigger?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Because that was like, I remember that hitting the. See, I'm talking about Britain. It might have been published earlier in the States. But, that I remember how hard that hit and reading it and thinking, wow, fucking hell.
Yeah, the first book was 77. So.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, so 78 probably in the UK. But you should probably try and read some of the Mick Farren stuff as well. Because Text of the Festivals is Mick Farren, where everybody's living on free festivals. It's like a post-apocalyptic thing. And the gods are Hawkwind and the Rolling Stones have been deities and what have you. It's really weird. But Mick Farren, Fade the Rambler and all his books, they were sort of concurrent to, they were contemporary to Rob. Mick Farren was a bit like the British Robert Anton Wilson in a way, to a degree, but more fiction. He didn't really get involved with the sort of psychonaut stuff. I don't think there's really ever been any of those British books like that. Honestly, I can't think of any.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any British. Don't think like I've got Trick Top Hat, The Universe Next Door. Oh God, think of the other titles, because they kind of spread out, didn't it? Well, they're not. I've got a bookcase for them.
Right.
Falcon Press. Is that what they were in the States? Yeah. Falcon Press books. And Prometheus Rising. That's another one. Yeah. Right. So because they, like I say, I'm just reading them off now. They were the books we were all reading. Like I say, I remember told you the 23 thing, didn't I?
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't work out. I was 23, never really had anything to do. I can't really honestly think I had. Yeah. And we were building a rehearsal studio at the time. This was 1985. And the NEC had an exhibition. And somebody said to us, I've got a load of paneling if you want it. You can have this paneling. Like, okay. So they went and picked it up. And literally the night before I'd said, 23 thing. Well, I lived at 23. That's the first house I lived in. That's really the only 23 I can think of. So the next day, we get to the fucking rehearsal studio to put all this paneling up. It's like 40 or 50 fucking sheets of ply. What do you call it? Every bloody one of them's got the number 23 stenciled on it in red.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, there you go. I remember mate John just looking at me and go, well, there you go. 23 for you, Steve. Like 40 of the fuckers. I'm guessing it was stand number 23 that they dismantled from whatever exhibition. It was probably stand 23. So it's just weird that, like I say, literally there's a whole fucking van full of panels with number 23 on them. So, I remember thinking, well, there you go. I'm obviously meant to be reading this shit.
Yeah, it's a classic synchronicity. So,
oh god, yeah. I mean, it's like.
Oh, we should probably wind this down a little bit.
Yeah, actually,
We
fucking
have
hell,
been going for.
I'm chewing your ear off here, mate.
We do wibble when we get wibbling, so.
Well, we haven't had a good wibble for ages.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, we
We're
need to do it more often, I think. But
well,
I think this has been a pretty good one. There's a lot of good stories in there. And,
I hope you got something you can use. But I mean, it's like I say, I'm sitting here in this place now, and I've been here for 40 fucking 2 years now, and this is my base. And I hardly saw this place for the first 10 years I was here. Yeah. Right. I mean, I really sort of like the first few months, but from then on, it was like with the festivals, it was like you were away from sort of early May, you'd come home for a couple of days every week, and that was it, then you're off again. What have you? Yeah, I mean, fucking hell, man. I really do wish I could take a few people back. Stick them in the time capsule, go back and just sit, because I think it's one of those things that once you've experienced it, you come back and go, oh yeah, it must have been fucking awesome.
Maybe I can astrally project myself there.
I don't think, sadly, I don't really think there's any proper, I don't think it's a proper documentary. There's lots of people took lots of film.
Yeah, I mean, there really ought to be. You'd think somebody would do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've asked around because I know there's several films of the dogs live that I've never seen. That people say, "Oh yeah, I've seen a film of you." Really? And you go, "Oh yeah, the light show looks amazing." I'm like, "Really?" Yeah. I don't know. I was always looking the other way.
Yeah.
This is it, man.
Yeah.
I'm going to change my name to Wally now.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to be Wally Dog from now on.
Well, that's the original Wally was a dog anyway. So
yeah, that's weird, isn't it? That's kind of weird. I didn't know that, until I always thought that was an urban legend.
Yeah,
because you hear so many stories of how Wally, where it all came from.
Yeah,
but apparently, that is the real story. It's from the Isle of Wight Festival. Some poor bloke looking for his dog, Wally. Who could have thought that it'd end up with so many? Oh, it's funny, I'll go back online now, have a look at Facebook, and I'll have a quiet chuckle, that fucking hell, to a certain extent, you owe your fucking, when I look at all the sort of like independent thinking people, because there are loads, really cool. And when you go on Blue Sky, and what have you, and even Threads, so all the nutters on there sort of thing. I was kind of smiling and think you'd love you'd fit at the festival.
Yeah,
you'd have loved it.
Well, that's good stuff. Yeah.
Anyway, young man, it's a pleasure to talk to you as ever. We shall have to do this.
Pleasure as always. Thanks for coming on and sharing these festival stories with us. With my listeners.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Strange. And don't forget, what does the Cockney spaceman say? Oi!
All right, talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon, young man. Thanks, man. Look after yourself.